Welcome back, guys, to the Deep Weeb podcast. For this special edition of the podcast, I'll be your co-host, Doth, with our special guest today, the Jazzy, and of course, KanjiEater. So yeah.
Yes, this show has been described as Pixel Park, or as the show where Kanji talks with age-adders and trolls for 2 hours, asking for their Anki settings. It seems like a pretty accurate description of what we're going to get into these days. So, yep, Doth is back, won the popular vote, and Doth, thanks so much for joining again. And for that impromptu intro, appreciate it.
Definitely, man, yeah.
And Jazzy, you need no introduction. You've become a little bit notorious, especially after the infamous Reddit post. It took you 1,500 hours of immersion and around 150 hours to get 10,000 cards in Anki, and you managed in just 8.5 months to pass the JLPT N1 with a perfect score. That's pretty impressive. Let's see some jazzy hands in chat. I'm certainly jazzed up for this one. I swear there's no more jazz puns. Jazzy, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank KanjiEater for having me on here. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Doth, as well, for coming on and co-hosting. I know here in the UK, timings are decent. It's the afternoon at the moment, but not the most pleasant timing for both of you, I'm guessing. So, yeah, thanks for that, guys. But I guess most people watching may already know me, either from Discord, so one of the many servers I'm in, or my Reddit post. But for those who don't, essentially, I'm Jazzy, and I managed to pass the JLPT N1 with a full score of 180 out of 180 in 8.5 months. And essentially, I wrote a Reddit post on how I did that. I kind of talked about, the immersion learning process that I went through to learn Japanese, and how I did it without ever, setting foot in Japan, without doing any sort of JLPT specific study prep. And this Reddit post, as KanjiEater has mentioned, has received a mix of different reactions, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. But other than that, I guess I'll just give a disclaimer straight away in case there's still any doubt. But I am a guy, if it's not already obvious already. But yeah, I'm just saying this because quite a few people that commented on my Reddit post seem to think I was a girl. But yeah, I guess the username makes it a bit ambiguous.
Like I said, I Googled it on Google Images, and I was afraid you were going to roll up as a scooter, because that's all that came back. It wasn't guys or girls. It was just scooters. Or,
I was hoping
wheelchairs.
you were a girl too a bit, not going to lie.
I'm sorry to disappoint, guys, but unfortunately, that isn't the case. But yeah, no, I guess the username made it a bit ambiguous. As for where it came from, basically, Jazz is a nickname of mine. Quite a few of my friends call me Jazz. A lot of people just tend to call me that. And when I was a kid, a lot of the games I used to play online, MMORPGs and all of that, Jazzy is a nickname that I used to use quite a lot, a username that I used. So it's kind of just stuck around as a username that I use every now and then for stuff like this. But yeah, no, maybe I should put /male in the title from now on.
The reality is what it is. We'll just have to deal with it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, outside of learning Japanese, I'm a physics undergrad student from the UK, and hopefully I'll be graduating this year. Some of my hobbies and things that I spend time on outside of learning Japanese and my uni degree, of course, COVID was a pretty big interruption, all of that, like I talked about in my post. But it's also one of the reasons why I started learning Japanese. But boxing is one of the things I'm quite passionate about. I've been an amateur boxer for a few years now. It's something I've dedicated quite a bit of time to. Other than that, I've been quite involved in a lot of societies at my university, on quite a few different committees. So I'm involved with, running different events, and, just having a good time at different events too. I also like reading, if that wasn't already evident from the amount of reading I did in Japanese. But yeah, no, I haven't actually done as much in recent years, if we're counting, English reading, as much as I used to do when I was younger. But I still read on a range of different topics. I like, philosophy, religion, business, psychology, all of that good stuff. And other than that, I just like spending my free time, hanging out with friends, going out and just chilling. So yeah, just your standard uni student, I guess.
It makes you seem so normal, but what you have accomplished doesn't seem to be, especially considering those reactions to the Reddit post. Why do you think that did get such a mixed reaction?
So I mean, I feel like from what I've seen on the Reddit, at least, or I mean, I don't genuinely go on there much. I don't go on Reddit in general, but I haven't seen many sorts of posts like that. A lot of the posts kind of be sort of the same type, where it's asking for tips at the beginner stage, or a lot of sort of beginner, intermediate level posts. Not many that I've seen of people that actually put a lot of dedication or time into it to get to a high level. So I feel like me kind of doing that. And I guess I'll talk a bit more about my thoughts on those reactions in a bit. But I feel like for a lot of people, it was just a bit jarring to see something a bit different to what's normally on that Reddit. And yeah, as you can see from the reactions, I don't think it was all bad.
No, it certainly
I guess,
wasn't.
No, definitely,
Yeah.
man. I mean, even my post was like an icebreaker, but like I thought I was impressive. But then like Jazzy, you came in and you like totally blew out, totally mugged me
Yeah, I mean,
with a full score.
yeah, I saw Doth's Reddit post, and like from what I remember, there wasn't that much controversy on it.
Right.
So I was thinking, if I do this thing, it'll probably be about the same. People that find it helpful, they'll find it helpful. People that want to dismiss it completely, they'll dismiss it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there was a lot more
I
controversy
mean,
than I expected.
I didn't get a full score though, so like that's one thing. Imagine a full score in like 8.5 months. That's like unfathomable normally, right? So
At least it was
just how
until
it is, yeah.
Jazzy rolled up. So what? So through the what would the major stages of that you covered in that Reddit post? How would you describe those major phases?
So do you mean like my reactions to the
No,
post?
more as to the actual content of it. What would you describe as the major phases of your Japanese learning journey?
Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, I feel like I split up roughly in terms of in the post in what I feel like would be good sections to divide up into. But basically, I had this first like 2.5 month period. So this first 2.5 months of immersion, where I didn't really know about online communities. My initial exposure was like AJAT and some other online blogs that sort of talk about immersion learning that I'd come across. And I'd basically gotten like the main idea from that it's you just immerse in stuff that you like, so you just spend all your time in that, or as much as you possibly can. Obviously, the philosophy of Asia is like all Japanese all the time. Obviously, for me, that wasn't really a feasibility. It wasn't feasible. But what I figured was that I'll just do as much as I can with the time I have available. So I'll just be efficient as I can. Just try to use that time as wisely as I can. So yeah, those first 2.5 months, I didn't really have any expectations as such. I was sort of just, grabbing a bunch of different anime, different manga. So very visual content, not much, not any light novels or visual novels at that point. And a lot of it was very incomprehensible at the start, because I think a lot of people tend to ask me about this, but I didn't do any like specific grammar study. So I never picked up a grammar guide or, any of that stuff that a lot of people tend to do. It was kind of just like hammering all of this input at me, because that's what I got from AJAT was like the general idea. So I was like, might as well trust it and go with it and see how it goes. So yeah, at the start, obviously, a lot of it was very incomprehensible, but by the end of that period, I'd started just picking up on regular grammar patterns and understanding what they meant, purely based on context, just seeing that come up loads of times in different contexts, with like the visual clues that you get. So yeah, I feel like that was the initial period. Learned a good amount of vocab, went through all of core, started mining, and I built up a basic grammar foundation. Then was like the next, I'd say, again, 2.5 month period, where I discovered online communities. I discovered the Moe Way, where they've got this online monthly leaderboard as well, where you can essentially compete for like immersion points as well, depending on how long you immerse for, how much you immerse. That really motivated me. I saw Doth's Reddit post, of course, that motivated me as well. And just a lot of people in general in these online communities that tend to read a lot. So I was like, you know what? I was planning on reading LNs and VNs anyway in Japanese, so might as well get straight to it. So I tried it, set up all the tools and everything, and yeah, I got going. And since then, obviously my uni holiday started as well, so I could put more time in, and things started just going up exponentially from there.
No, amazing. Yeah, actually, in that
Yeah.
9-month period, what would you say were like the main milestones or achievements, and like how often were they?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I guess like concrete milestones, stuff like things that you can define numerically. So that, of course, when I hit 1,000 hours of immersion, that was nice. When I hit like 5 million characters, I think at end of August or near start of September, somewhere around there. I think it's September. That was nice. Of course, after JLPT at some point in December, hit 10 million characters. So those are nice, like, numerical milestones that were nice to hit. Then I guess there's more of the stuff that you can't really define, but there's certain points where you physically feel like you've improved quite a lot. So, for example, like I feel like in October, after I had that month in September where I immersed a ton, and then in October I started having more, difficult content that I was going through. So, for example, I was reading Dies at the time. After that period, I started reading some normal difficulty stuff. Again, like I talk about difficulty levels here, but it's all, very difficult to define, which again, I'm sure we'll come on to. But yeah, so after that period, I could physically, sort of feel clearly that my reading in Japanese had become a lot more natural. The whole thing felt a lot more natural than it used to. It felt like I was exerting myself less when I was trying to read. So I feel like that was a big milestone in terms of how I felt reading Japanese, if not in terms of, a numerical number, than just how comfortable I felt with it.
Any other major milestones throughout that period, or
any other milestones? I mean, I guess it was nice in the Moe winning the monthly immersion leaderboard 3 times. That was nice.
Yeah, are you still competing in that?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really log that much anymore. To be honest, I don't immerse that much anymore. Yeah,
he's already won.
As I mentioned in my, I mean, I wouldn't go there. I think we'll talk about how I feel I'm at, but yeah, no, definitely not. But it's just that, like I mentioned in my post, I'm trying to focus on other things, prioritize other things. So I'm still being consistent, but not putting as much time into it, of course.
Gotcha. So how about our first question, which this one actually comes from Reddit, but we will be prioritizing the ones from the Deep Weeb Lounge Discord server. So if you want your questions answered in the future, definitely go there. So Premier Anon asks, how much Japanese content did you consume before deciding to learn Japanese? And were you already the type of person that could just spend 12 hours in English, reading a VN or something like that?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, when I was younger, I did used to watch a lot of anime and read a lot of manga. So, I mean, the story of how I first came across anime, I guess, was I was like 13 and I was walking home from school with one of my friends. And like the shows I was watching at the time, stuff like The Big Bang Theory, The Walking Dead, I'd caught up on those and I was looking for the next, cool thing to watch. And my friend goes to me, my sister watched this anime recently called Death Note, which is really good. And I mean, my initial reaction was kind of like, this cartoon stuff, why would I watch that? The typical reaction I guess a lot of people would have. But then I went home and watched the first episode. I was like, I'm bored, might as well give it a go. And then I binged all of Death Note that week. And I guess the rest is history, I watched a lot of anime, a lot of manga was read in the next few years after that, especially between like, I guess 13 to 16. I went through like most of the big series, and then after that, I feel like I stopped watching as much. So after that, it was basically just, any big seasonals that came out or any sequels to stuff that I'd already seen. If they came out, I'd watch those. But in general, it wasn't as much as before, especially in recent years. In terms of visual novels, I had never finished a visual novel in English. I played a, Gyakuten Saiban, so Ace Attorney, when I was a kid on DS. That was a good game. And also I played like the start of Steins Gate VN in English at one point. But yeah, I never completed a VN in English. But like I said, I did read a lot in English.
That was my experience as well. It was like I would play the Gyakuten Saiban ones, but I never actually played a VN in Japanese. Yeah, I actually really still like those.
Yeah.
Let's
great. Oh, yeah. Actually, another question from Tenacious G. This is on topic of Japanese ability. You were talking. What is your place now, and like, are you satisfied at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer. I guess I'll go through it like step by step with each of the different types of, I guess you could say, the different facets. So with reading, first of all, I don't think it's any surprise that reading is probably what I'm best at, given it's also what I spent the most time at. But even then, there's still a lot that I feel like I could improve. But if you ask me whether I'm satisfied or not, then it's to be honest, I'd say I am satisfied in that most of the content that I come across now, I can read quite comfortably without like a text hooker or without looking up too many words. So the amount of words that I have to look up is few enough that, I can just infer it from context or, from the kanji if it is an unknown word. So it's like I rarely come across stuff where I can't understand it without that. So I'm satisfied in that sense. But, if we're talking about like native level, there's still a big gap, I think. Because when I watch like Jikkyos on YouTube, so VN Let's Plays, a lot of the time I find that with natives especially, like the reading speed is something which is very hard to match, especially with skim reading. And it's something that, I still can't get on that level, yeah, especially with skim reading. And I feel like for most Japanese learners, it is hard because a lot of people don't practice their skim reading because, you're trying to prioritize comprehensibility and you're stopping to look up words and whatnot. But yeah, so basically I'd say I'm satisfied, but there's still more improvement to be done. Listening, I guess not as good as my reading, but still pretty good. Where I have problems is like sometimes I'll listen to podcasts with like not the best audio or just a lot of people talking over each other and, bouncing between a bunch of different topics. And I'll miss words here and there, which can be difficult. Other than that, like really technical topics. So sometimes vocab will come up, in a string, which I might be able to read fine, but hearing all of those, in a row, especially words that I'm not used to hearing in my listening, in like a very, specialized subject, then I'll end up missing stuff there for sure as well. So there's definitely a lot of improvement to be done in listening. But again, most of like the anime audiobooks and stuff or podcasts I listen to, I don't really have too much issue. And then, yeah, I guess I won't say too much about output because there'll be a section on that too. But output's definitely what I'm focusing on most at the moment and what I need to improve on. So if you ask me if I'm satisfied with my output at this moment, no, simply put.
So why was it that you did decide to take the JLPT N1? What led you to that?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, some people have this, this notion that, I started Japanese with like the intention to speedrun JLPT. I get called a speedrunner sometimes, this label. And the thing is, when I started Japanese, I didn't even know JLPT was a thing. It wasn't ever really my goal. But when it came to the time of, people signing up to it, I've seen, Doth's Reddit posts. I was like, it could be a cool challenge. I saw the people signing up for it. So I was like, on a whim, I might as well do it too. And another reason was that I feel like it's kind of hard to gauge your own comprehension with Japanese, make a strict judgment of it. Because sometimes you think you're better than you are, and sometimes you think you're a lot worse than you are. So I just felt like, with all the imperfections this test does have, it'd be a decent way of measuring roughly where I'm at, from like a third-party source. So I was like, you know what, if I don't prepare for this at all, I just try and get as good at Japanese as I can, and then just take it and see how I do on the day, then I feel like it'd be a decent, notion. But again, I think it definitely has its faults as a test. So yeah, no, my goal was never to, speed run N1, but
Ooh, interesting. So you never actually planned to do it, but would you say that you could actually do it faster if you really tried to?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think this is like, the limit as to how fast N1 can be passed. I think if someone's specifically trying to pass N1 right from the start, say you had some learner and someone was like to him, right from the start, you're passing N1 as quickly as you can. And this guy, he was on that speed run right from the start. Then I think there's a lot you can do quicker. If you really try to optimize and be efficient, which I think would be quite painful, but I mean, there's probably someone out there that wants to do that. You'd strictly go for, like non-fiction text, try reading as quickly as possible, read a lot more news and stuff. I didn't read that much non-fiction, not any news at all, to be honest. So do a lot more of that. Other than that, actually do some JLPT, prep would help. So actually, study the grammar points, actually go through some of the exercises. I think that would help you pass it a lot quicker, but that's only if you're talking about how to pass the JLPT as quickly as possible, which I don't think is a sole goal that anyone should really have, to be honest.
Oh, interesting point actually about like preparing for a JLPT, because I did some preparation. I know like a few other guys who have done it too, but we didn't get full scores like you, Jazzy. So maybe that's actually the difference. Maybe we shouldn't prepare.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to see the comparison on that, as into how much bang for your buck you get, so to speak, with reading or immersing compared to the actual prep. I feel like it's hard to compare that sort of thing.
So I guess
definitely, yeah.
That's what I would ask next is, I mean, what do you attribute your rapid success to? Is it mostly the reading, you think? Was it the comprehensibility of what you were reading?
Yeah, so I mean, I did write up some tips where I roughly went over some of the stuff that I thought were, quite crucial in terms of to think about while you're immersing. And one of the things that I think a lot of people know me for going on about a lot is this idea of, quality of immersion as much as quantity. Because obviously there's so many different facets to immersion. That's why, this whole numbers game, thinking that you get to a certain number and you're there, is really misleading, because there's so much more to immersion, like the density of your immersion, how many different sources you're using, what you're immersing from. And you can't measure all of that in just, a few numbers, which is why I always tell people to, take these numbers with a grain of salt. So what I always say is focus on like the quality of your immersion as well. So when you're listening, for example, try and pay attention as much as you can to your reading. So with reading, try and understand as much of it as you can. Of course, there's going to be limits, especially when you're beginning, but try and gain from it what you can. Don't just let it go in one ear and out the other. Same with your listening as well. Try and be as switched on, as focused as you can while you're listening. And you'll gain so much more from your time than if it's just going in one ear and out the other, because it's not just that process of just white noising. You're not going to gain much from it at all. So I think that's really key. And again, like I said, there's so many other factors that you can't really measure, stuff like density of immersion, and just a whole host of things.
I think that's one of the really interesting things about what your Reddit post made me realize was I mean, you hear a lot in the immersion-based community about like being able to tolerate ambiguity and not having to understand everything, because eventually, if you get enough immersion, like you'll just get used to it, right? And then, so I mean, where do you strike that balance, Jazzy? I know you already said that at the beginning you can't really understand everything, but at what point do you start being like, okay, I'm just going to try to understand 100% of everything that I'm reading?
Yeah, so like I said, for me, I kind of made that switch at like the 2.5-month period. So for me, before that, like I didn't really think of white noising. I didn't really, think too deeply about that whole idea. When I was just watching a lot of anime, reading a lot of manga, I just, read AJAT and I was like, okay, surely it should work. And I mean, I did gain like basic grammar patterns. So I feel like at the start, you have to tolerate some ambiguity. This is why I don't usually recommend people to go straight into reading an LN or a VN right from like day one, because you'll have a really tough time and you're not going to be able to get much at all, I don't think. But with especially listening as well, with listening, you're pretty much always going to have to tolerate some ambiguity until like you get to a very high level, unlike with reading. Why I'd say that I switched to that 2.5-month period is because once I started reading LNs and VNs, there's so many tools that make it so easy for you to look up everything that I don't think really you have an excuse not to, is how I felt. Because with, manga, you've got an OCR, that's pain. I'm not even going to lie. I didn't look up everything while I was reading manga. But LNs and VNs, you can look up everything up so easily. With Jomi-chan and stuff, you've got monolingual dictionaries and stuff as well when you get to that point. It just makes everything so easy that I feel like at that point, you should try and understand as much as you can. And yeah, just on that topic as well, like I don't like comparing language learning to physics, but as a physics student, I'm going to do it anyway. But what I find is that when I solve like, physics or math problems, when you learn just the theory of it, it doesn't really go into your head. You don't really understand what's going on until you actually apply it to some problems. And then you're like, oh, okay, I see how this is used now. Do you get what I mean?
Yep.
It's kind of the same with reading, whereas your brain makes those connections when you're actually using it to like sort of solve problems. Kind of like a puzzle, but I guess not really. So like with reading, if you're just saying like the sounds and you're just moving on, you're not making any connection in your head with what you're reading. Whereas if you're actively trying to think about it, trying to put the pieces together, it's like, what does this mean? What does this grammar pattern come into? What is it doing here? And then once you get like that click and everything fits in together, and you see that over and over again in your reading, and it happens over and over again. That's what forms those, that real understanding of the grammar and the vocab that you're coming across.
Yeah, definitely, man. White noising, massive problem. I mean, like a lot of us have faced before. But besides that, what do you think is still like missing from the community, like people who are learning Japanese, or maybe even mistakes that you've made along the way?
Mistakes that I've made. I think it's an interesting question because this whole idea is like, what would I? So I guess this is kind of like the question of, what would I change if I could do it differently?
Sure.
Mistakes. One thing I would say is like I did this weird thing when I started reading VNs, where basically every line that I came across, what I would do is all the vocab that I didn't know, I'd look it up, and then essentially I'd like reread that line, but saying the vocab. So I'd like reread the line over and over again until I could remember the vocab, which was very stupid.
Interesting.
I don't advise this. But yeah, no, I stopped doing that like halfway through my first VN. But it was basically like doing Anki on the spot, but without Anki. But yeah, no, I wouldn't advise it because you just get through so slowly and it makes it a drag. And I think if you're actually thinking of like overall efficiency and enjoyment in terms of both, perspectives, I don't think it's worth it at all. So I'd say that's something I wouldn't have done. Other than that, I guess from my Reddit post, I did mention how I switched from sentence cards to anime cards or vocab cards, whatever you want to call them. But again, even with that, it's like, would I have switched earlier? I can't tell if that would have been better because I'm not in that place where I had switched earlier. So I don't know if sentence cards really brought me that much benefit, or if they, if they did or if they didn't. It may be that early on it was a help to me, and then what I found is that eventually I got to a point where the context of the sentence was helping me guess words too easily, which is why I got rid of it. But before that, I feel like for certain things it was good. I mean, yeah, that, and also mainly just the fact that it just took way too much time with sentence cards, and anime cards, vocab cards are just so much quicker. So yeah, I'd say maybe those are like, yeah, go on.
No, sure, go on.
No, I was just going to say, yeah. So I said probably those are like the main things that I'd change. But yeah, that's about it. I feel like the other mistakes and stuff, it helped me learn a lot and is the reason why I'm here today. So I wouldn't change any of it really.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, on the topic of like context itself, when it comes to cards, anime cards or like Anki cards in general, how much context do you put on those cards? Do you think like there's a trade-off where like if you put too much, like a picture, sound, sentences, it becomes too long to make them?
Yeah. Okay. This is an interesting question. I've seen a lot of people talking about this. How much to put on your Anki cards? Do you keep it like the bare bones, just the very minimum, or do you put on the full anime cards, like the sentence audio from your VN, the image, and everything? And honestly, my take on it is that I don't really think it will change your Japanese learning about that much either way. I don't think it's a huge factor. With the tools that you have nowadays, so like the mining setup that I put in my Reddit post by Stagatsons Zero. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but shout out for the great mining post because it is brilliant. But you've just got a single hotkey and you've got your screenshot. Audio takes a bit longer. So what I did personally is that I used to always take audio and images at first, more so just because of the novelty than anything, just because it's nice having that on my card. I don't even think it makes that big of a difference. What I did though was that was for VNs. With novels, I don't put an image, I don't put audio. I just mind the sentence and the vocab at the front. So with novels, I didn't bother to find a picture or anything. But then eventually, even with VNs, I just stopped putting the audio because it does take a bit of time. The screenshots I'll put every now and then if it's a nice CG because it takes literally no time. But yeah, because I think there are studies that do show having an image on the back can help with your retention. So for a lot of people, I feel like having an image rather than just the definition can help a lot. For me, I found it didn't make that much of a difference, so I stopped doing it. But honestly, I don't think it makes that big of a difference. And if anything, if you can have an image on that quickly, then go for it because it does help for a lot of people, is what I've heard.
Cool. I think we'll get into some of those topics a little bit more in depth. Let's start doing some deep dives into the various aspects of Japanese in your learning so far. So I guess first off, output. I know you said that, starting to think about it, starting to maybe move your focus towards that. What plans do you have for outputting?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been putting more focus on that, especially, over these last 2 months. So, since 2022 hit, I've been putting more focus there. But I'd say like the first time that I started actively trying to output was maybe like 4 months before today, 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah. And from like 5 months ago, what I started doing was that, I'd actively try to output a bit more. It still wasn't that much. But what I found really helped was that in my immersion, I started actively looking out for things that would be useful in output. So, for example, if I saw, a sentence in my listening and I was like, this expresses an idea that I've wanted to say this other time I had a conversation. Let me, try and remember this or, think about this a bit more. And I just build that up over the time. And I think that does help quite a lot is what I found. Again, my output is still not, amazing. There's definitely a lot of improvement to be made there. But yeah, I have been making steps towards that these past few months.
So is that from here? Like, do you have any like concrete plans? Like, I want to be able to do this with output. I want to spend this many hours with it. Anything like that, or is just going to be more free flow? What's your plan?
Sure, yeah. So it is very much free flow at the moment. It's kind of, whatever I find for that week. So I mean, it's very volatile depending on like what plans and stuff I have for that week. Because for example, some of like the avenues that I have for output are that, like my uni has a Japanese society. My friend's uni, which is close to my house, has a Japanese society. I went to one of their events. Made a few Japanese friends from there. And every now and then we'll hang out or we'll talk on the phone or something. So I mean, it just depends week on week how much time I get. So I don't keep like a set plan. So yeah, it just depends on when I'm hanging out with people, what we're doing. I've also been using Hello Talk for the past 2 months because I see a lot of people recommend that. Yeah, I feel like it's been pretty good. I mean, my experiences of it have been pretty good. So what I found is that a lot of people are quite receptive. Maybe out of like 10 people that I message, like 5 or 6 will like message back, and then like
Right.
2 or 3 will probably develop into a conversation that goes past like 2 weeks or something. And yeah, I've had like 3 or 4 people that have offered to like call quite often with me, and like one of them actually actually nitpicks like some of my mistakes and stuff, which has been really useful because I haven't had to, it means I don't have to spend money on a tutor. And yeah, he's a great guy, but honestly, I really appreciate the help there. I found that's been a good help.
Cool. So Hello Talk is probably gonna keep using that. Maybe make some more friends in Japanese, and then just kind of wing it from there.
Whenever I can.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Do you have any like specific goals or like kind of concrete things you'd like to be able to do with output?
Right, of course. So I mean, obviously, it'd be nice to get as close to my English as possible. To get as close to that native level as possible. I'm not too fussed on like pitch accent and everything, as long as what I say can be heard clearly. So I don't have this goal of like reaching native level, I guess. But what I do want to be able to do is be able to express myself, clearly in the same way that I can, obviously, with my native language, English. On a range of different topics, very fluently. Be able to articulate myself. I guess that's the end goal. To be honest, to not really have any problems using it on whatever I want to speak with.
That is a little bit unfortunate that you haven't mastered pitch accent yet, because that is one of the next things that Century D asked about, which is if you haven't mastered pitch accent, his theory is that you're going to have to start over from zero because it's completely crippled you.
Yeah, dude, you're gonna have to uproot yourself.
So
yeah,
saying, Jazzy, do you have any plans there? Any have you done any pitch accent study?
To be honest with you, I never did any at all. But like from natives and stuff that I've spoken to, they tell me that my Hatson's okay. Again, that might just be flattery. It might just be awful. Who knows? But I have been looking more into it recently. Now that I have been focusing more on output. And now when I read and stuff, I'll also look up like the pitch of a word when I'm reading, which is not something that I used to do before. So yeah, I mean, I'm taking like little steps. I don't think it's a huge thing. I feel like there's bigger things in your accent. Like being able to pronounce things more clearly is a bigger thing than pitch accent, is what I mean. A lot of natives tell me.
So the people on the Deep Weeb Lounge Discord server, we're begging for to hear some of that sweet Japanese jazzy output. So if you don't
Right,
mind,
okay.
日本語で続きましょう。近年では、異世界アニメの流行についてどう思いますか？
Okay. 確かに、最近のアニメにそういう異世界転生という展開が、多く発生しているのは事実ですよね。まあ、最近といっても、約10年前から始まった傾向だと思うんですけど、それと、それと、アニメだけじゃなく、ラノベとか漫画とか、そういうオタクコンテンツに、全体的に言うと、こういう傾向がありますのは、本当です。自分が好きかどうかという話なら、このジャンルの中では、大体の作品は、似たような典型的なストーリーを持っていると思います。評価をすると、9割以上かな。9割以上の異世界小説は、あまり好きじゃないかな。でも、たまにすごくいい作品もあるんですね。自分的には、リゼロというアニメ、ラノベもあるんですけど、このシリーズはめっちゃよくできていると思う。まだラノベは読んでないけど、これからあれも読んでみようかなと思ってる。それと、多くの作品には主人公が転生するとき、チート能力をもらうみたいな展開もあるんですよね。多くの作品の中には。最近、日本に引きこもり問題が発生していることを考えると、そういう非現実的な都合のいいみたいなストーリーを描いた作品の促進するのはどうかなと思うところも正直あるんですね。それが正直な感想かな。
なるほど。英語で続きましょうね。So next question, next question. So Tome-san, for the Jazzy Man asked, has transitioning from input to output been difficult for you, Jazzy?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was pretty difficult. I guess, obviously the first few times I ever tried to talk, it was a struggle. Oftentimes I'm trying to think, what is the right vocab in this? And then I come up with something, unnatural. I mean, I probably said something unnatural in what I just said as well, but, yeah, I mean, it does get easier over time to, be able to naturally formulate it. I feel like at the start it was very difficult, but just practicing it more and more, and the stuff that I learned from output just naturally became, easier to use. One thing I would say is that obviously because I have read quite a lot, there are times when I'll use vocab from reading, which you wouldn't really say in natural conversation that much, while speaking to a native. That does happen every now and then. But then I feel like, again, that's sort of ironing out over time as well. Once you just naturally have more conversations, you start ironing out those stuff yourself just by, exposing yourself to more people, having more conversations. You get that feedback between the two of you. And I feel like that irons out most of the errors over time. So yeah, it's not too bad at the moment, but it was definitely difficult at the start.
Doth, for you, it was just meet with the Obasans,
It
right?
it was amazing, I would say. I mean, for me, I went with the Obasans, but for Jazzy, I think even with just Hello Talk, he sounds great, to be honest. So,
So, moving on to reading, let's talk a little bit about how did you get into reading in Japanese? What were the kind of steps in that progress?
Right. Okay. So, like I said, I used to read quite a lot when I was younger. I've always loved a good story, so that's never really been anything new. And as for why I started reading LNs and VNs in Japanese, of course, when I started joining these online communities, a lot of people did recommend reading, but it was even before that I sort of had this idea that I'd want to read LMs and VNs. Because a lot of the anime that I was seeing, the sequels and stuff are in LMs. Sometimes the season doesn't come out, but you've got LMs that continue, which is nice. There's a bunch of great VNs. So like some of my favorite anime are based on VNs. So Steins Gate, Clannad, stuff like that. So it gave me the idea that there must be loads of other great stories out there in VNs as well that I haven't come across. So that was one of my main reasons for why I wanted to get to those.
Great. Actually, on the topic of reading in general, how did you deal with like kanji? How did you approach learning kanji?
Right. Okay. Again, this might be something quite unique compared to like the majority of immersion learners who go through some sort of individual kanji study, something like remembering the kanji. So I didn't really do any of that. I didn't do any sort of individual kanji study, no radical study, none of that. I just learned it through vocab. So, I just started straight away from core. I just read a lot and I just gained knowledge of kanji just through the vocab. So, I associate kanji with sort of the vocab that they appear in and stuff. And people say that, with remembering the kanji, it helps you distinguish closely, very similar kanji. And I feel like at the start, there definitely were times when, I'd confuse the kanji for, midori and en, for example,
Sure.
Stuff like that, which, they look similar.
Right.
But over time, you realize that you're making that mistake a lot or that you're picking up from context and you iron it out over time. Just as you read more, you get a lot more familiar with the kanji. So I didn't feel like I really had that much problem, especially, later on. I feel like remembering the kanji does have its uses, but for the time investment it takes, I don't think it's worth it at all.
There you go, guys. RTK, definitely not worth it. Please don't do it.
Doth, how did you go about? Did you have a similar experience there?
I mean, I didn't do RTK, but I did do a bit of like individual kanji study because at the time, I haven't come across like the Moe Way, DJT, and like reading in general. So I went into that mistake definitely. So,
and then I did full old school RTK. I didn't do RTK 3 or whatever, but I did it, and it took months, and it didn't feel like I was actually learning Japanese because it turns out it's not, right? So
I think I feel like one of the big things for me was that as well. Like the idea of spending, so long learning these things which don't have any like practical output, because I wouldn't then be able to read after learning that. I think that was a big turner for me. I was just being a bit impatient as well.
Yeah, I mean, the theory was that, you get familiar to all the faces and then it will, give you kanji superpowers. It certainly made it so that I was used to seeing those kanji, but it sounds like this speed running or not, I mean, spending months on that is it doesn't seem like the best use of time. So there you go, RTK officially denounced.
Wait, kanji, did that include writing when you did it? RTK?
I did it on my phone. So okay. I would write it with my finger. So
can you still write it?
Heck no, I dropped those cards, dude. That's the issue with it. Like the retention eventually just starts going down, and it's like, man, these are the worst cards ever. And it's like as soon as the retention starts getting like, I don't know, you just start forgetting them because you start seeing them in your vocabulary, so then you lose the motivation that you had before for even learning it. So I know some people actually manage to keep up with their RTK cards, but like I don't drop stuff usually. RTK is one of the few like Anki decks that I would just like completely dropped because it was like this is too much time, and at this point I've gotten through it, so I know what the benefit was supposed to be, and I kind of got it, like the familiarity with it, but yeah, in general I don't think I would do it again.
Yeah, and like this is where I would shill the Kanken deck, since like after knowing the vocab and like trying out the Anki deck, it felt much easier to like practice writing. And maybe like Jazzy, if you do have any plans to practice writing, maybe you could also try it. But
yeah, no, I had it being showed a lot by a lot of people. So yeah, if I do plan on writing, then that's where I'll go.
I mean, that makes sense, especially if you're headed towards actually needing to write it at some point, right? Like starting to work on that Kanken part. Before that, though, like at the beginner stages, like I don't think there's as much benefit as people have made it out to be. So, all right, So the Shoui method. We've heard its enigmatic rumors on the internet for a while. We finally got Shoui to actually jot down some of her thoughts in a cohesive manner. So I've kind of sprinkled them throughout the interview so that we can, over time, indoctrinate you guys into the cult of the Shoui method. The first one, rule A for this, is when reading, don't move on to the next paragraph until you think you understand it inside and out. Read analytically. So this was actually one of the reasons I think I was really interested in what Jazzy said, because at the same time I was seeing stuff like this posted at the Moewe, which is just like, understand everything. What matters is your effort. White noising is cringe. So at least on this first point, is this a buy for you guys? Are you guys in on this so far?
I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but also at the same time, Jazzy, have you ever had a time where, like, no matter how much you try, you just don't understand like a sentence or like a usage of a word?
That's
Does that
the
ever happen
important
to
part.
you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when you're beginning, you can't expect to understand 100% completely. There's always going to be stuff. Like for me, I did have that initial period, which helped me get familiar with basic grammar. So that when I did go into LNs and VNs, it helped with that. So I was just looking up, more complicated grammar, and the vocab I didn't know. But even then, sometimes there's stuff maybe based on like the context or maybe some cultural reference that you still don't get. There's always going to be stuff that you don't fully understand. And sometimes you just have to see it in a bunch of different contexts to really get it, or just, when you're better, when your understanding is better. So, there's always going to be a limit. I guess my thoughts on like this, of course, I agree on it. The idea of trying to understand as much as you possibly can. It's something I've been trying to emphasize myself for months now, like throughout my journey. I think it is really important. The idea is that, just try and understand as much as you can, and there's got to be a balance. So when you say like read analytically, I wouldn't say read analytically so much as, it's kind of just a process of, looking up the words, looking up the grammar, trying your best to understand. And if you can't understand it, then move on. I don't know if analytically is the right word for it, because you don't want to start, going too in depth into a single sentence, so to speak.
Interesting. So you're actually more saying just understand the words and the grammar from it, and if it didn't click, move on.
Yes. I mean, understand the sentence as a whole, because that's where you really form those connections as to what everything does in the sentence, right? Mm-hmm. If you can't understand the sentence, it means that you're lacking understanding of something in there. Mm-hmm. So it's really when you understand the sentence that, you piece together what's going on in the sentence, the different components, so the vocab and the grammar. But what I'm saying is, I don't think, because I saw people commenting about this on the Reddit post as well, about how I read analytically and that it is studying. But I mean, the thing is, just going on Yomi-chan, looking up the vocab, looking up any grammar I don't know, giving it a moment to think if it doesn't click straight away, to try and think about what it means, then moving on. Or, if no matter what I can't get it, then I just move on anyway. I wouldn't call that analytical reading, really. Yeah, I know. Maybe the connotations I have when I think of analytical reading is, I'm actually thinking, specifically, okay, this vocab, what is it doing? This grammar, what's it doing? And just spending 10 minutes on a single sentence, which is not exactly what it is.
So you're saying, okay, let's try to summarize this again. So you're saying with the, you wouldn't go as far as to say it's analytical, but you are trying to understand the whole entire context of the sentence, all of the grammar patterns, all of the pieces inside of it. At what point is it too far, in your opinion, from your experience?
Right. Okay. So when you say try to understand each individual part of the sentence, I don't deliberately think, it might be hard to explain, but I don't deliberately think about, each vocab or each grammar pattern that I come across. What is this doing in the sentence? Mm-hmm. In terms of actively studying what that's doing in the sentence. Again, I feel like this is something that's hard to describe.
So you don't look at the sentence like a linguistic perspective, like, oh, this vocab is affecting this thing.
Exactly.
Like, this is a
exactly. Yeah. So I don't think of it like that. It's just sort of, if there's any vocab I don't know, I look it up. If I understand it, then cool. If I don't, then I'll spend a bit of time thinking of it. Any grammar, sort of just how it connects everything together. Because if you can understand the sentence as a whole, and if you're not missing any of the nuance, that means you understand the pieces in that sentence. If you understand the sentence, and there's no holes in your understanding there, you don't then need to spend ages analyzing every single part of that sentence and being like, okay, why does this do that? How does that, just like Doth said, how does that vocab, how does that grammar pattern affect this and that? So again, I feel like it's hard to explain, but if you want to set a limit, set a time limit. So I would not spend, for example, 10 minutes on a sentence. I wouldn't. I don't think that's wise. You can get a lot more bang for your buck out of those 10 minutes if you just read more. The general process I advise is just look up all the vocab. Before you look them up, before you look them up, try to engage with it a bit. So think about, does any of the kanji look familiar? Try and basically infer what it might mean before you look it up, just based on the kanji or the context, both the reading and the meaning. Then look it up. So that should only take like a second. Then look it up. So it's not just, spamming Yomi-chan.
Right.
So then when you open up Yomi-chan, then you look it up. If you understand it, then move on. Then if there's any grammar you don't understand, look up those grammar. Then then you should be trying to, understand the sentence as a whole. And the thing is, when I break it down like this, it makes it seem like a very analytical process or something that takes a long time. But it shouldn't be something that, you put too much time or effort into, if that makes sense. So yeah, once that happens, do you understand the sentence? If you do, great, move on. If you don't, spend a bit of time thinking more about it, thinking, oh, what am I not getting? Something's not quite clicking, and do the best you can. Give it like a minute or two max. If you still can't get it, then just move on because you'll get more out of your time.
Gotcha. All right. That's a very detailed explanation for reading. So it'll be interesting to hear what people's feedback on that is. One of the things that kind of goes along with this emphasis of comprehensibility in your reading, because I think we can say that, right? We're still emphasizing comprehensibility, maybe not the analytical aspect, but emphasizing getting as much comprehensibility out of the reading as possible. There was a study posted, and this was on the Moe Way, so somebody can post it there. I also posted it yesterday in the general chat on Deep Weeb podcast. It's got quite a name because it is a white paper. I figured we could talk a little bit about what some researchers found out and kind of see if this matches up with kind of where Jazzy is with his thoughts on reading, as well as Doth's thoughts as well. So the title in Japanese is 外国人学習者による日本語の速読. So speed reading for non-Japanese Japanese learners. And it's basically a study of the processes relating to information processing. Okay, so what does that all mean? Really, these researchers were going after, like, how does familiarity with the content and the language affect reading speed? Okay, so familiarity with the content, and how does that affect your ability to actually soak up the text, right? So what they did was, this was a while ago, so it was in 1990. They got 46 people that came to Japan around April, and in October they started this test where they would basically give them like a pre-test and a post-test with some reading, and they would try to see like what you read before affected what you read after, that sort of thing. And then they ended this test in February of the next year, so 1991, and it was a mix of people from all over. So like I think it was mostly non-kanji Asian countries. Like I don't remember seeing like a Chinese person in here or something. But this study is all in Japanese, so you guys can read it on your own time and check it out. But it was like Mexicans, Brazilians, like people all walks of life coming into this, around 18 to 21 years old. Definitely all foreigners, all trying to get better at Japanese. And the researchers told them when they were doing these readings beforehand, they said, try to aim for about 70% understanding. So it's still kind of like a speed reading-esque thing, but I think they just didn't want people getting caught up on any one piece, right? Because these were relatively, I think they mentioned in the study that they consider them to be intermediate Japanese learners, but they're like 6 months in, right? So whatever that means to you. So on average, they told them target about 70% comprehension, and then on average, the foreigners got about 65% of the questions correct, and they were getting like 15,000 characters per hour. About is what they were reading. So given that it was still pretty low comprehension, like if you're only understanding like 65% of a text or something like that, relatively low comprehension, but still going at a pretty fast speed. So what they found from this, and this is what I thought was really interesting. There's two parts to this. The first part's kind of obvious. The first part is that there was a weak positive trend. So that means in general, like these things seem related, but there's more to it, right? There are some external factors probably coming into this. There's a weak positive trend between understanding the contents and the reading speed. So this is where like seeing stuff like this, as well as what Jazzy's talking about, it's like, okay, the more you understand, the faster you will read. Like that's pretty intuitive at that point, right? Like all of that matches up with your guys' understanding so far, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Resounding yes. Okay. And then there was also a weak positive trend, and this is where I thought it was really interesting, and this is kind of confusing, but between people who are more likely to read fast, were more likely to read correct, or the people that were slow were more likely to read wrong. So that's the first group. Both of those things are in the first group. That if you're reading fast, you're probably more likely to be reading it correct. And if you're reading slow, you're more likely to be reading it wrong, which is interesting. So the opposite to that is that there are less people, it's not impossible, but there are less people that are going to be reading it slow and right than that are going to be slow and right or fast and wrong. There are less people that are going to be reading it. Let's try that again. Slow and right or fast and wrong people are more rare. So if you're reading fast, you're probably able to do so because you are understanding more. And if you weren't understanding and you're reading slow, then you're probably going to be reading it wrong more likely. So that's what I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what does that mean to those of us that are still like really early on? All of us are reading really slowly. Like, what does that actually mean? So first off, reactions to that. Did that click what the two sides there are?
I mean, it does resonate with me, but because it's a weak positive too, it's kind of hard to say for sure.
Right.
Like, is it causation or is it just like relation?
Right.
So
yeah, there's definitely that. Like they talk about this a little bit, that like they try to isolate out whether it's just the specific individuals that they had or something like that. But it's one of those things that like people are so varied in how they read and their own reading speed in the first place. I didn't get a real strong reason for why it is weak positive versus just straight correlation.
I think like on that, I feel like what Doth said is a good point. So obviously, the fact that it is a weak positive trend is obviously something to take into account. But in general, I feel like one thing to also think about is that with this sort of test, once you've been told you've got to achieve a certain comprehensibility, thing is online when people, especially in communities and stuff, you're always going to get people throwing out, different reading speeds as to what they read with.
Right.
And, their own sense of how much they comprehend. But the thing is, whenever you're doing a test like this, where there's actually, a numerical value put to your comprehensibility, most people instinctively are going to want to go slower to try and get as much right as they can.
Right.
And the thing is, the people that are better at reading will still be able to get everything right while also reading quite quickly. Whereas the people that, aren't used to normally reading that fast will obviously slow down, but their reading's also not at a point where they can still comprehend things quite well. So I think that might be another factor to take into account here. But yeah, definitely. Again, it is a weak positive trend. So you definitely will get people that are, reading quite slowly, but still understanding a lot. And It's just a matter of, improving their speed of, processing what they're reading.
Exactly. Yeah. Something else there, Doth?
Yeah, actually, on the topic of familiarity, this is kind of a thing that I've been thinking about. Because Jazzy, you did mention that you don't look up on like manga, and like sometimes you don't look up when like you don't feel like you have to. But what happens with like series where you know the flow, like you've read the writer so many times that you have familiarity with it? Do you end up sometimes like skipping the narration? Like you know what's going to happen, like you can like foresee the future or like the plot developments, or like you end up just like focusing on like some other stuff like the dialogue instead of like, or do you still read everything?
No, I still read everything. I don't think I've ever skipped anything like that. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Interesting.
But
Because yeah, when it came to the N1, to the reading section in general, did you read like the whole page from the beginning, or did you skip to the questions first? Like, was there a strategy with that?
this is interesting. No, I read the text first. So I've had quite a few different approaches on like the reading section. You know, some people skimmed, some people read it thoroughly. You know, looked at the question first, and so on. For me, I read the text first, quite detailed, like in quite a detailed way. So I didn't really skim, but again, I didn't really have any problems with timing, so I was still able to get through the text quite quickly. But I was like trying to catch everything I could. So when I went to the question, it was kind of just like, oh yeah, I remember reading that at this point in the text, and then I'd quickly skim over it at that point and be like, oh yeah, it was here, then refresh my memory and then answer the question, and then the next question I'd go into that. Again, it jogged my memory as to where in the text it was. So that was kind of my approach that I took.
Okay. So did you find yourself backtracking a lot, or was it like just really easy to like remember where it was in the text, just look back and like confirm once? Or...
No, I mean, I did have to backtrack. It's just that obviously when I did go back to it, I didn't then read it in the same, detailed, thorough way. It was just skimming at that point because I was just trying to find generally what the text was saying because I'd already, read it thoroughly to get a good understanding of it. So then it was kind of just, skimming to be like, okay, what was it again? Just to remind myself.
Interesting. Because like my experience is a bit different since I went to the questions first and then skimmed through the part. And if I didn't get it yet, then I would read slowly. But like the funny thing is, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I've heard most people do. So I think that probably is like, the approach most people take. And I think there's definitely a lot of sense to that approach as well.
Yeah, because like both of us have full scores on reading. So I think like it's not really the approach that's the problem with people. It's like the reading itself that people still have, difficulty with the comprehension.
For sure, yeah.
So then the question that came up for me, and they actually addressed this in that study, is so if you understand little, are you doomed to read slowly? And they cover this that no, actually that's not the case. Because the people that were more familiar with the context were able to work to the maximum of their processing power. So what that really means in a practical sense is if you're having trouble reading something slowly, read something easier so that you can build up more context and then, slowly build up that comprehensible input so you can read more and more challenging texts that, match your interest, right? So that's probably not too surprising. I just found it really interesting. One of the diagrams they had in there, this might be a little bit difficult to explain without looking at the diagram, but it is on there. It's like somewhere near the last page. There's this diagram of processing power versus the actual data that you have. So those are like the two axes there. And the idea is not all of us have the same amount of processing power. I actually just tested myself as an English reader the other day, and I came up disappointingly below average even at my native language. So I assume that's partially just like not enough practice, but also processing power. In general, like some of us are going to be able to absorb things faster. So they kind of have this graph where it's like, okay, you can work to the maximum of your processing power, but somebody else, like Jazzy the Sponge over here, Jazzy the Sponge is up here, and then KanjiEater, the Chud, is like down here with his processing power, right? They're never actually going to necessarily like meet each other because we can only actually work to whatever our maximum is. There might be ways to, raise processing power to some amount, but I kind of think about this like a computer, which is like, your computer's only going to work as fast as the CPU in it, and you can upgrade it or something, but that's a different CPU, right? Unfortunately, I can't upgrade my brain or something like that. So with this idea of processing power, before you can actually reach your potential though in a foreign language, like you have to have enough context to even work up to that point of processing. And so anything before you meet your full potential you're not actually going to be able to process things as fast as you would be. So I guess, again, in practical sense, what I'm trying to say with all of this is that it's really difficult to compare yourself to somebody else on this, which is relevant to my fellow salty Redditors. But also, you're going to want to eventually get to your own potential, not to somebody else's. So, and the way that you do that is just by continuing to build up more and more context, is kind of what their theory was. And I feel like that probably matches with what a lot of our experience has been in the language learning community. But thoughts on that?
Yeah, Doth, do you want to go first?
I mean, I agree. Honestly, I don't think there's much to talk about now that you give that explanation. So
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that point that like there's going to be a certain cap for processing power. To be honest, I don't think mine's as high as you're trying to make it out to be. Even in English, I'm not actually, which is my native language, I'm not actually that fast of a reader. Again, I feel like processing power is probably part of it as well. Also, just the fact that I like to spend a lot more time on the stuff I read. Really taking it in.
yeah,
I feel like there are stuff that you can do to improve how fast you can process, but again, like you said, some people are always going to be able to process faster for sure. Just on that as well, like I think you made a really good point about reading sort of stuff which you can understand even at your level a lot of, and then trying to focus on being able to process it quicker. That was something that I put in at early stages to be able to get quicker. So, for example, when I was reading Summer Pockets, the VN that I always show, that was my second VN. I'd already read 2 LNs at that point as well. I'd had like 2.5 months of anime, manga as well. So like my vocab, if we're talking in terms of like Kotoba quiz levels, which I don't like using that much as a measure, but if we're going to go there, then it was like N3. So basically, it was the type of VN that, for certain sections, especially after I'd finished like 2 or 3 routes, there wasn't much words to look up. There were some really easy sections. And also, it's a VN where like for each route, you play a lot of the same bit again. And most people tend to just skip that. But for me, instead of skipping, I just play it on auto. So because I already knew everything, I just play on auto, and then I just try and catch as much as I can. So I try and train like my ability to process Japanese that way. And I feel like that's something that worked quite well. So that's one reason I I feel like that's the main thing I probably got out of Summer Pockets, more so than a ton of vocab. It was that before that and after that, there was a big difference in my ability to just process Japanese text where there's not much I don't know.
I can actually confirm this because that is how I practice speed reading. I would play VN on auto and try and get the best out of it, and I would like increase the speed as I got better. So
Interesting. My personal experience with this has been I think I overdid it at some point with getting used to the ambiguity, and I would just have it on like auto or something and be like, oh, I think I probably got that. Oh, I think I probably got that. Or like watching like a Jikyo, like we mentioned, like a let's play of something like Higurashi or something like that, right? And at a certain point, I do catch myself like it definitely becomes easier to white noise, not even consciously, if you're just doing that all the time, is what I found. But maybe that's yeah.
Yeah, no, just on that as well. I feel like it really comes down a lot to your personal preferences as well. Like I know for some people they're very comfortable with tolerating ambiguity, even when they read, and I feel like it does have its benefits at times. But for me, I feel like it kind of helped with reading in that I feel really uncomfortable moving on if I don't understand, exactly what I'm reading. I didn't really have that problem with anime or manga for some reason, but when I started actually reading, VNs or LNs, it was kind of like, I had to understand as much as I can. So I feel like just that innate ability to stop myself because I didn't want to move on unless I understood it. So I feel like, that's going to vary from people, from person to person. Because I know some people that genuinely will do the whole analytical reading, 10 minutes per sentence if they can't understand it. So there's definitely a scale there.
Okay, so real quick, one more point on that study that I thought was interesting is that they did do the same test on a Japanese high school group, and these students, even though they were told, understand like 70% or something, they ended up still getting around 90% correct, and they were reading at like 1,000 characters per minute, according to this. So in the end, what I kind of took from that is, okay, Jazzy's definitely not the enemy. These Japanese high school students are. So keep that in mind, salty Redditors. So do you guys think that you will be do you think that sort of reading speed is like obtainable in a reasonable amount of time from where you guys are headed? I guess
Personally, for me, not really, because the best I've gotten is, I don't know, 30K, like maybe 40K. Even then, it's like I'm forcing
Jeez.
myself a bit,
Yeah.
right? But like with Japanese, I don't know if like in that study they're like under a pressure test, or if that's just like their natural reading speed. But I know a few
Sure.
Japanese who, in general, read like 50K, 60K, tategaki, of course. But like I might be able to read that yokogaki if I like really try to, but I don't really see myself doing that, honestly. Yeah.
Thoughts on your side, Jazzy?
Hold on, sorry, my connection. Yeah, I dropped connection for a bit. Could you just repeat the question?
Oh yeah, sure. So with the speed of reading, like, do you think you'll be able to achieve like a really fast native reading speed, like, and get to that point where you could understand basically at like a native level speed, perhaps?
Right. Okay. Sure. So, I mean, in terms of reading speed, native reading speed, like Doth mentioned, you hear numbers like 50,000. You hear a whole range of numbers when you go on the internet, because some of the natives that I've spoken to who actually, they're not huge readers, but, as like salarymen, they do read every now and then. And, they'd say that they read at like 20,000 characters an hour. And then you get people that can read at 50, 60,000, people that speed read, natives like 100,000 plus.
What?
So even within natives, there's
that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, there's a guy in the Moe way as well. He's a native, and he finished a light novel in like,
I think
it
I
was
saw
like
that.
70,000 characters long, and he
yeah,
finished it in
Afu,
like
right?
45 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty crazy. So I mean, you see stuff like that, man, and it's like there's such a big range even between natives that it's hard to sort of define what you mean by that.
Sure.
But I guess if we're just talking like the baseline level, like the average native level who reads like a decent amount, they're not like the biggest reader, but they read like a decent amount. So you hear numbers like 30 to 40K, I think Doth said, is quite a good estimate. And again, like it's going to vary so much depending on the content you read. So if we're talking like purely, processing something where you can understand as much as, you can understand it all straight away, then I think it's possible, but it will take a very long time. Like what I find is that at this point, I get a lot of diminishing returns in terms of reading speed. Even if I'm like purposely trying to train it, the amount of gains that you get compared to when you're early in is a lot slower at this point. So like for me, like 20,000 characters an hour is like what I average on most content. Then if I like actively try and speed read, I finished an LN at like 30K an hour, which is probably the fastest that I've done.
Right.
But like again, it depends a lot on the text. If it's something harder or something like academic, then like 15,000, maybe even less, like 13,000. If I'm spending a lot more time trying to actually think about what's being said.
Wait, actually, quick question for VNs: do you skip the voice lines or do you wait until they finish?
Yeah, it varies so much from like VN to VN. Generally, I don't skip voice lines unless it's like a very slow one, which isn't like a big like a big plot point, I guess. Then I'll normally skip it. Or like if it's a VN where I'm not hugely invested and there's a part where basically, if I'm not hugely invested, I'll skip a lot of the voice lines. So if I read it faster than they voice it, I'll go to the next line. But most VNs that I'm actually really into, I won't skip it unless it's like a bit which, is just not that interesting.
Right. So you average like 20K without skipping is the takeaway? Or
20K, I'd say some lines I skip, some I don't. So in the bits which I'm not too invested in, if I read it quicker than they voice it, I'll skip it. If they're speaking quickly anyway, I normally just listen to the end of the voice. So yeah, it's like a mix. Yeah.
Yeah, because that matches up with me because I never skip and I get like 18K normally. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it depends on the VN too. So yeah, but yeah.
So I think now we've kind of covered at least my how I'm coping with Jazzy's excellence and after that Reddit post. But Jazzy, what were your thoughts about some of those reactions to the Reddit post?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, my connection is dropping a bit. So if my voice does start cutting out at any point,
we'll let you know. Yep. We got you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, I feel like this is a question that a lot of people have been asking me anyway.
Right.
Like I've had requests to sort of speak about it because I guess I've made comments on it here and there, but never really like a full response. So yeah, I guess we'll get into the drama, what a lot of people here might be for. So I guess in general, how I'd classify it is that there were basically three broad types of reaction that I noticed to my post. If we're broadly classifying them. From what I saw, like the first one, and I guess what most people want to hear me talk about is, I guess you could say, the hostile reactions. So people that tried to come up with, some sort of unjustified justification. I'm probably not making it clear. I mean, like the cope comments, or people that dismissed it as a lie.
Cope, yep.
Or people that actively tried to disprove it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, with the people that think it was a lie, to be honest, it's not like I can't understand where they're coming from. It's the internet at the end of the day, and you can't and you shouldn't trust literally anything you come across on the internet. I think that's a very valid point. But yeah, I mean, like, I guess my response to people like that is, if you want it, then the evidence is all out there. I've literally had people that have stalked through all my Discord messages after my post, then message me being like, "Yep, I saw all your messages, and it looks like you checked out." So I mean, I'd like to think most people probably have better things to do than read through my Discord history. But if you want to go through it, it's all there for you, man. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, some people just aren't gonna want to believe it no matter what I say. So I mean, I've had a few people, message asking for a load of different things. Like, can you send me this as proof? Like, people ask my Anki settings. One guy asked that, my Anki stats. So I sent him that. And then he asked, can I have your JLPT results without like the reference number crossed out? And then just on. And people ask for like, these crazy stuff. And at some point, I just stopped entertaining those requests. Because I mean, I've said this before as well, but the post was purely meant to help people by detailing out my journey with resources and like my thoughts and parts of the process, so people can take from it what they want. I couldn't care less about online clout or internet points or whatever you want to call it. And if that's all I wanted, I wouldn't have put that much effort into the post. If you actually think about it, why would I go onto an online platform I don't even use, Reddit, and post like a long detailed post like that if I didn't want to help people? It doesn't really make sense unless I'm missing something. Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, if some people don't want to believe it, then that's completely fine. They're free to do so. It doesn't take anything away from me. I wish them the best either way. Then I guess the other sort of like subgroup is the people who tried to come up with some way to justify it to themselves by saying stuff like I'm an outlier, or that the method is useless.
Yeah, I did
even
see
though
that.
there are plenty of So I mean, there was a lot of that. I think there are plenty of other people, such as Doth, and such as if you go into like some of these online communities where reading or mass immersion is heavily emphasized, then you'll find that there are a lot of people who also do get to a high level. Maybe if not the same extreme, then a lot quicker than people using traditional methods tend to get to.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like the general stats for how long people study for N1, etc. So I definitely think there is, value in the method in general. Yeah. Other than that, yeah.
Yeah, actually, on that point, I would like to confirm that a lot of people, like in the Moe, because we have like a JLPT results spreadsheet. A lot of people with like 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 years have passed the JLPT with flashing very good scores. Like even people who are like on full-time jobs, like Jama, shout out to him, very epic person. He also passed N1. So yeah, I think it's very doable actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I mean, I don't think the idea of immersion as a whole should be treated in the way it is, in terms of both extremes. As in, you'll get some people that treat it like, it's some secret weapon. It's like, as in it's something really strange, like some key that they've worked out which no one else has. And then you get people on the other spectrum that like hate immersion or like any, use of the word, the whole idea, they just completely reject it. And I can't understand either of those ideas. Like immersion is something which I think makes a lot of sense as to why it would get you good in a language. For most people, a lot of people, going to, the country to live there and interact with people is normally like, a recommended way of learning a language. So it would make sense that, bringing that to your environment, if you can't physically do that,
right,
would make sense. Again, I don't think it's something outlandish. I think my method was something that, for a lot of it, people had already emphasized in the past. I think another comment was the idea that, so my native language is English, but I also mentioned that I also know Urdu because of like family. So I think first of all there was this idea that Urdu somehow helped me with grammar. First of all, I feel like people very much overestimated where my Urdu is at. First of all, I can't read it at all. Even though my speaking isn't great, my Japanese output is better at this point, which is embarrassing now that I think about it. I should really immerse into Urdu this summer. Yeah.
I mean, according to Reddit, Japanese and Urdu are basically the same language. So
same thing, man. Yeah. No, but I mean, for all though, like I didn't really feel like it helped me in any way. Even the small knowledge I did have. In terms of like the grammar as well, it still felt really alien to me. It didn't feel like, familiar. So I think people that are really overestimating how much they think that helped. But again, who knows, I guess. Then I guess there was the third subgroup who was people that tried to, actively disprove it with whatever theory they could come up with. I might miss some, but some of the ones I saw were this guy who came up with like a Photoshop of the results. And then he tried to say that they were photoshopped. Did you guys see that?
I saw someone randomly post, "Why were the results photoshopped?" I just thought it was just somebody.
That was
purely
trolling.
I figured that was just somebody from like DJT or something like that. Because you actually,
on, like, the actual post,
you managed to unite both 4chan, DJT, and Reddit because they both wanted to say, "This is very demotivating to me." So it's like you did what many have tried.
Yeah, I mean, there was a comment on like the original post where some guy linked to a site where he was like, "Oh yeah, I've disproven it. It's photoshopped." And then like people I know who'd also taken N1 put their same, image of their results through the same site, and everyone that had done it, abroad on like the abroad JLPT result site, everyone got back there was Photoshop. So I mean, clearly, JLPT are giving out some fake results there, man.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember that post actually. I remember somebody from like the Moiway sharing that they also was photoshopped apparently, because they were abroad.
Yeah. I mean,
I put my Japan one through it and it wasn't Photoshop, so it says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly, if you live in Japan, you get proper results. No, but it's just the most ridiculous things, these things without checking for themselves first, putting these sort of theories out there. Another one, someone talked about me sitting in another country or they said, it's not on in the UK. Obviously, I didn't explicitly mention that because for a lot of people I know went to a different country to take it. I thought that was fairly common. I didn't think it needed to be explicitly mentioned. But I mean, like, I guess because I was pretty late to the comments, but people sent some of like my Discord screenshots, I guess, of me saying that I was taking it somewhere else. So
Did you
yeah,
actually
shout out
reply
those
to
guys.
all of them at the end?
I checked it like 3 or 4 days after, and I replied to most of the ones then, or a lot of the ones that I came across. I haven't checked it since then, man. Like I just don't generally, I've been busy nowadays. I haven't been on Discord much either. But yeah, when people DM me and stuff, I normally reply to most questions.
I would really.
Yeah, I feel like.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like that was probably, the majority of the hostile ones. Yeah, some people just, you could tell they didn't even read the post before they commented. So they'd come up with some sort of, critique without actually reading the post first. Or, just borderline psychotic theories. It was all there, man. It was all there. There was a nice mix.
I would definitely like to believe that people would be willing to fake their JLPT results score to hang out with me and Doth. I mean, that's why Doth faked his results, right? Just to get on the Deep Weeb podcast,
definitely.
right?
Why else wouldn't I, right?
Yeah.
Of course, man. And then I guess like the next group was people who, I guess, like you mentioned already, were kind of discouraged after reading that post. And again, I obviously, I can't, control how people are going to react to the post, but I genuinely do feel bad that, some people did take it in that way. Like I don't think they came across in that way that I was trying to boast. It genuinely was meant to be like a helpful post. And, I just want you to know this. Like, it genuinely wasn't my intention to make it as, a boast or something like that. But, I hope that for most of those people, it does turn into like a way to motivate themselves later to maybe, introspect on some things that they could improve and hopefully take some good from it at some point. And one thing I want you to keep in mind as well is that, if you're the type of person that has like a full-time job, you have kids, you have other things that you want to prioritize in life, which is completely fine, then you've got to remember that I did put in a lot of time to this. So like, people say average, it was like average 6 hours a day. And obviously, I would try to be efficient with time. I tried to squeeze in wherever I could and stuff. But if you don't want to prioritize it and you want to put less time in, that's completely fine. You'll still get there eventually. You can take from the method what you want, but obviously you just have to adapt the fact that obviously it won't be the same time, limit.
Yeah. Also, on the topic of time, because I remember somebody actually calculating the difference between you and me, Jazzy, and like we're actually not that far apart. Like I think you mentioned 1,500 hours for N1, right? I think.
Yep.
Yeah, like 1,550, yeah, around that.
Yeah, I'm 1,700-ish, so it's actually pretty close, And so like it's not really 8.5 months versus me like 15 months. It's more like actual hours spent, immersing. So it could be like, let's say the average person maybe 2,500 hours, or like if you're better at that, maybe 2,000 hours. So like I think it's a very concrete number we can use in that sense.
Yeah, I think like based on stuff like that, 2,000 hours like seems to be like a nice amount for N1 using immersion, I guess. Again, I'm going to say like these numbers should always be taken with a pinch of salt because, like I've said, there's so many different factors to immersion that you can't measure numerically and which aren't, I guess, clearly understood. So stuff like, of course, density of immersion, the type of stuff you're immersing in, the focus you put in, how much you personally are getting out of, all the immersion you do. There's a lot of stuff that you can't really, weigh in that sense. So, I mean, yeah, it's nice to have these numbers from people, but I wouldn't use them as like concrete amounts. And then if you get to it, be like, oh, I'm not here, or, you might even get there quicker. So again, I'd take all of it with a pinch of salt.
Definitely,
again, I feel like while those two groups were definitely there, from what I noticed, of course I might be biased, is that I do feel like the overwhelming group that I saw was people that it genuinely did help.
Yep.
So obviously there was a lot on the post, but even outside of that, since the post, I've had an overwhelming number of messages on both Discord and Reddit from people saying that it really helped. Either it really motivated or inspired them. For some people, they'd stopped learning Japanese for a while and it motivated them to get back into it. Some people that had messaged me told me that they didn't really have any clear direction with where they were going with their Japanese, but they feel now they do thanks to this. One person I think said that they go back to my post for motivation every time they feel down. So I mean, I feel like there definitely are these really nice comments, which definitely make me feel like there was worth in putting the post out there. But yeah, obviously with all the controversy on there, there's definitely going to be more highlight on the more negative comments that were on there.
Right. I back to the point about like 2,000 hours being enough to pass like N1 or whatever, something like that. Like I would be really curious in I know you mentioned Doth, that a lot of people have, like, you guys have like a spreadsheet in the Moe way of like how close people are getting, or like, what the results were, that sort of thing. I think it would be really interesting to see, because it does sometimes tend to come across like some sort of like survivor bias, right? Like that, oh, like these guys got really good, like they are the speed runners, and that's why people are so interested in it, because it still doesn't seem normal, even if we are saying like, oh, 2,000 hours is reasonable. Personally, I think I'll have to look at how many immersion hours I have again, but like it's over 4,000, and I haven't taken a JLPT practice test in like a year, but I still wasn't passing like the reading section because I was just reading so dang slow. So that's kind of where a lot of this interest was for me in general, not necessarily JLPT, but just in general improving reading. But I really do think that there's a pretty wide variety, and I mean that's one of that's the reason why I have these conversations on the podcast, is because like I see such different results for myself, even though I do tend to spend a lot of time in Japanese on a daily basis. So I'm not sure what that is yet, but I definitely will say I find it really useful and helpful that you guys have documented out what you have done and why you've had so much success. So I definitely appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Actually, on the topic of that, there's like a few members I'll be very interested in like knowing their hours. For example, like Jama, I mentioned him before.
Yeah.
He's a full-time worker, so like similar to you, Kanji.
Yeah.
And he did have to grind a bit, but he did end up passing N1. So like I'm interested in how people, because like me and Jazzy, of course, we have more free time with students, so like we can manage it better. And like since we are students, I think we have this like studying mentality in our everyday life. So like that might also help towards practicing or like just studying in general. But people who are like full-time workers, they probably do have a lot of fatigue in their life, and so when it comes to actually immersing, that could become like a downside. So I'm very interested in like those types of numbers. So.
Yeah, I mean I think that's one of the reasons people find like Steve Caulfield so interesting, right? Like, I probably just butchered that dude's name. The Reed dude. He he's older, but he still makes progress in languages and that sort of thing. And at a certain point, your brain does stop being so juicy and elasticy. So I am curious if that, what impact that does play. But I know a lot of you guys are young. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like I said, of course, there's going to be a whole host of different differences, which is why I think comparing times can be just really difficult to do. And, for some people, it can be discouraging as well.
Yep.
And like you said as well, I think there's such a small sample size, it's hard to say accurately what is, like the expected amount of hours. So I think it'd definitely be good to get more numbers from people, see what it's looking like.
All right. So back on to reading. So Lewd Warrior asks for Jazzy. Do you have any criteria when picking up new VNs and LNs, like difficulty, kanji count, number of characters? We originally were saying that it seems like you were emphasizing comprehensibility in your reading at the beginning, maybe not so much, but how did that kind of morph over time? Are you now focusing more on like comprehensibility? Did you do that throughout your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the focus was always on comprehensibility over, anything else. But this sort of idea of, I guess, criteria with what I read, it's more so that I have a bunch of, VNs and LNs that I want to read, and, I roughly read them in sort of like increasing difficulty order because I didn't really have any preference in terms of what I wanted to read before. So, it made sense to go in some sort of rough, increase in difficulty order. And I say rough because sometimes, I'd drop down something which was slightly easier, something harder. It's really hard to, measure the sort of difficulty as well.
Right.
I talk about JPDB being like a good ballpark estimate. Some people don't like it. I found from my own experience that it tends to give you a good rough estimate, or at least for VNs anyway. Most of the VNs I've played, I'd say it was spot on with the quantitative rating it gave, or at least plus or minus 1 off it. But again, like, it's so difficult to measure this sort of thing because the reason why different contents are harder, varies between different content. So for some, it might just be there's so much, weird kanji, especially if you're reading without a text hooker, you'll come across a lot of stuff that you don't know or you won't be able to read. For some, it's just that the writing style is really different, or, that it switches between a lot of different topics. There's something erratic about the writing which you can't really grasp. So it's just so hard to quantify this sort of thing in the first place. And what I do want to say is, while you should keep a rough idea of where you're at and pick stuff which is roughly at your level, because if you go way above your level, you're not going to be able to get much from the content you're immersing in. And if you pick something which is really easy, then obviously your growth is going to stagnate. And whether that's fine to you or not is completely fine. But, I'm just trying to make that point. But yeah, you should never, ever, read something because of its difficulty. Because at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying what you're reading, then you're just going to hate immersing in it. You're just going to start dropping it eventually, and then you start dropping a bunch of stuff. And so there's always got to be these compromises and balances that got to be made. So yeah, no, I didn't really have a specific criteria. It was more so just stuff I enjoyed, and yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to some grammar, because I know that's another thing that I think that has been pretty different for you, Jazzy, compared to what we've heard about from people like even Doth, where you didn't actually pull out like some Nihongo no Mori like videos or something like that and try to familiarize yourself with all the JLPT points or something like that. You just, as you would see them throughout the text, right, like kind of internalize them, correct? Like, what was your experience with grammar?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of talked about how, in that initial period I had, just sort of throwing all of that immersion at me, a lot of it incomprehensible at the start. Once you start, picking up, once you learn like the basic vocab, then it's kind of just putting them together. And when you have like visual clues, so when you're watching anime or manga and you see a bunch of different contexts, then you can start automatically sort of figuring out the basic grammar patterns that come up really often. And I mean, you'll be amazed at, what the brain is capable of in terms of recognizing these sorts of patterns.
Right.
But again, I think that's only applicable right at the start. And, it becomes very slow later on. So just like you said, when I started reading, then I started looking up grammar that I didn't know. So most of the basic grammar, like I said, I didn't have too much issues with. And most of the other stuff, usually you can look it up just on Yomi-chan, especially when you add the monolingual dictionaries. It's great for grammar definitions is what I find. And most of the time you can find it on there. In the rare case I couldn't, or that it was, then I'd go on the dictionary of Japanese grammar and I'd use that. But I feel like it was very rare that I had to go on that and that it wasn't on Yomi-chan straight away, or a grammar pattern that I'd already recognized. So yeah, that was kind of my approach to grammar. Even like people say N1 grammar is, quite rare. But what I found is in a lot of the immersion that I went through, even like some of the simplest LNs, I came across N1 grammar.
Yep.
So I don't know, I feel like, just read quite widely and you'll come across everything eventually.
Yeah, I'm still looking for one of those obscure N1 grammar points that only shows up on JLPT that I've heard of. Do these exist, Doth?
I have seen everything, but like there's some that I rarely see. But the thing is, you can see them like in anything,
right?
Because like I've seen a grammar point where I've only seen it in like two things, Dies Irai and like this really easy manga, Okami Shonen. So like it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
There are like 2 or 3 in there which are very rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, most of them you will come across eventually.
Also, when it comes to grammar, Jazzy, did you have any problem like parsing sentences, like deciphering which is actually grammar, which is just vocab, or like hiragana and stuff?
No, again, I can't tell how much of this was from that initial period or not. Maybe that just helped me immersed as to when I started reading. Maybe that already helped me sort of parse text to a basic ability. But I mean, if you're actively trying to understand as much as you can, I don't really agree with the idea that you'll miss grammar points, because there will be something off about the sentence to you. Like something won't click.
Right.
Or at least that's what I found. I feel like there might be individual differences. And then you'll want to actively look everything up, see what you're missing, and you'll pick up on it. eventually, at least, is what I found.
So maybe
Cool. Yeah.
maybe now we can get into the topic that has already come up quite a bit, which is VNs. So what role did these play throughout your journey, Jazzy?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess it's no big secret that I did read a lot of VNs over my journey. VNs were one of the main sources that I immersed in. I read quite a few VNs. And one of the reasons why I think VNs are great, at least what I found is, especially when I was early on, I could stay engaged with VNs for a lot longer than I could with LNs. So it was easier for me to read longer periods, especially in one sitting with a VN than I could with an LN. Whereas with LNs, it took me quite a bit of time, and it was pretty rough at the start before I could, put in the same amount of hours in one go as I could with VNs. So I feel like that sort of visual and audio cue that you have, that support that you have with VNs helps a lot. And that's one of the main reasons why I do recommend VNs.
I think yeah, go ahead.
I agree 100% with this. But if we go to the Shoui method, okay, rule D, LNs over VNs because they are easy to pick up and read and easy to reread. Jazzy, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I mean, I got asked a question like this a while back as well about, if we're talking pure efficiency, what's better, LNs or VNs? And, again, I feel like you'll come across everything no matter what you read. It's nice to read a good variety. So what I'd recommend is, you read a bit of both. But there's always going to be trade-offs. Sure, what I find is that in simple LNs, I came across all sorts of grammar. So even some complicated grammar patterns. Whereas with most of the easy VNs I play, all the grammar was very simple. I found there wasn't that many, difficult grammar patterns that I came across in easy VNs when we're comparing to easy LNs, where I feel like there's still a lot of, more complicated grammar patterns. So I think maybe you can, you probably can pick up more if you're just reading LNs. But then think about it. If VNs are going to keep you more engaged, or if you enjoy that more, then of course it makes more sense to read that. And I don't think any potential, efficiency component is going to outweigh that. I don't think it's that significant that you should prioritize that over just reading whatever you want to read.
Great. So, like for readability, you would say that VNs have a lower barrier of entry, per se.
For sure, I would say so.
That's interesting. I mean, if there's no pictures, man, how are you supposed to understand what's going on? That's what I got to say.
Yeah, you got it. CG, man.
Yeah. So maybe now we can move on to Kamidomo131's question, which was, given that you spent a lot of your time on VNs, how did you go about reinforcing listening comprehension? They say they've heard that N1 speedrunners have problems with weak listening comprehension due to that focus on reading first. Thoughts on that?
Okay, so I mean, first of all, there's this idea that all of my immersion was reading, but I did do other listening. Like on average, it was like 4 hours of reading a day and 2 hours of listening a day was like what my average comes out to, up to the point I took N1. So I was listening as well. It's not like I was just reading. I was doing a lot of listening right from the start. And with my listening, I use like a whole range of different sources. So I use podcasts, I use audiobooks, YouTube videos, anime, dramas, movies, basically just everything pretty much. So I can't really say much with that. I guess I've already talked about where I feel like my listening comprehension's at. There's definitely still gaps, with like I said, podcasts where everyone's talking over each other, audio quality is not too good, that sort of thing. Also really technical topics. Other than that, most of the stuff that I listen to, I don't really have any problems with. I'm mostly quite happy with where my listening's at.
So it would definitely be a mistake to consider you a VN only reader, because you basically still did everything and there was still a balance, but even if most of the time you go to reading, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So how about Cardion from Reddit asks, did you use any English text? So I'm curious about this one as far as, like, I guess you've probably already covered this as far as like comprehensibility, but did you ever find it useful to, look up things with like Google Translate, DeepL, something like that in order to boost comprehension even at like a beginning level, intermediate level, Or was it always just, nope, we're gonna stick it in Japanese, and if I don't understand it, I will just move on?
Yeah, no, it's the second. I've never used DeepL. I've never used any other sort of machine learning translation program. The only time I ever used Google Translate was when I first started manga for OCR, purely for the OCR, and then I copied that into the dictionary because I didn't know any better setup. But then once I got a better setup, I stopped doing that. But yeah, no,
Gotcha.
I've never translated anything using any translation software.
Okay.
Okay, interesting. Actually, on the same topic, but this is about output. Since you've never searched anything in English, then do you think that it's hard to think of like keywords or like translate when it comes to English? Have you ever had this experience?
This is a good point. And actually, someone asked me about this recently as well, in terms of like translation work I've done. So actually, just a month ago, I did like a freelance translation job, Japanese to English. So, I mean, at first I found it quite weird translating from one to the other because I'm not really used to it. But I feel like one thing that helped me, which is maybe counterintuitive, is that I didn't switch to monolingual dictionary straight away. Like some people recommend that you do it straight away. I'm more of the opinion that you should do it when it's more of a comfortable transition, and that fears that it's going to completely make your understanding of Japanese unnatural are largely unbased, in my opinion, because just through a lot of immersion, you're going to fill in all those holes anyway, and you'll pick up the nuance of what a word really means purely through your immersion. I wouldn't leave it too late, but again, I wouldn't rush into the monolingual transition. And I feel like from doing that, the English to Japanese transition quite a lot early on, it helped with translation, translation work. But yeah, it's not like crippled me to the point where I think I translate from one to the other in my head. So I purely think in Japanese or in English, and that translation job went quite well. So I feel like it's been okay. Oh, but just on that though, how you mentioned with that though, right at the start when I was doing like a practice translation thing, I did actually look at like a fan translation of it in English to compare what other people tend to do. So I did do that to see, how other people tend to translate it, how that differs to how I translate it, and I made that comparison.
Okay. Cool. Actually, on the topic of like monolingual transition, how did you approach that? Like, did you just force the Japanese, or did you also like add the English if you didn't get the Japanese fully, or did you just leave it in English if you didn't get the Japanese? Like, how did you go about that?
Okay, so yeah, like I said, I made the transition about 5 months in. So like I'd read about 2 million characters at that point, probably more than most would read by the time they make the monolingual transition. But so because of that though, I felt like it went quite smoothly for me. So like you said, I switched all my dictionaries over into Japanese, and then I had the one English one as well, just in case. And I think a lot of it is about holding yourself accountable, because what I found is that when I was reading for a long time, especially the later hours when I'd get tired. So say there was a day where I read like 10 hours, after like 7 or 8 hours, the last couple of hours, I'd find maybe I get a bit lazy, especially when I was first making the transition in terms of the Japanese definition. Like if I saw like a huge block, sometimes I'd go down to the English one, which is a bad habit. But yeah, no, I corrected, like I started actively telling myself not to do that, even when I was tired. And yeah, after like a couple of weeks, that ironed out. And yes, I feel like mostly went quite smoothly. Obviously, if I just couldn't understand the Japanese definition, I'd go to the English one. And then over time, it became so that more and more of the time I could understand the Japanese one, until eventually I just got rid of the English one completely.
Ooh, interesting. So like after 5 months, so totally how many cards are actually like fully English or like fully Japanese in that case, would you say?
I mean, all of mine are monolingual because I actually went through and switched them all into monolingual.
Ooh.
Again, I mentioned this in mistakes as well. I don't recommend this. I know why I thought this would be a good idea, but up to that point, I had about, let me think, there's about 5,000 around there, 5,000, 6,000 words in bilingual. Yeah, or maybe closer to 4,000. It was around that region. And I actually went through and switched them all into monolingual, which is probably one of the biggest mistakes I made in my journey. But yeah, it was just a waste of time.
Can we talk a little bit about listening now? So did you spend much time doing like passive listening as well? What did you do in regards to that?
Okay, so I mean, my thoughts on like passive versus active immersion really is that making the definition is just misleading, and I don't think it should be done at all. Because like there's this case study that I've talked about before. Is think of these two people with one doing passive immersion, quote unquote, where they're listening to something for 3 hours, let's say 3 hours straight, and they're paying attention maybe 20% of the time. And then you've got another person listening to exactly the same thing for the same time period, but they're focusing like 90% of the time. Obviously what each of them gains from that is going to be so different, but both might come out thinking, okay, I've done 3 hours of solid immersion based on what their mentalities towards immersion might be. So this is why I don't like making that, definition, because what really is passive and what really is active, there's so many different, it's more of a scale, I guess.
Right.
And more so than even that, I wouldn't worry about that too much. As in, like, sure, I did passive immersion in terms of if you want to define it as doing immersion while I was doing other tasks. But what I would do is I'd try and focus as much on it as I could. So it was basically the same as my active immersion. So while I was doing stuff like, cooking or cleaning or, just going for a jog at the gym in between sets, just stuff like that, times where I'm not really, where I'm doing something, but I'm not having to focus on anything. I tried to just put as much focus on my immersion as I could while I was doing that. And I do want to put a disclaimer: if you are cooking, be careful not to burn yourself. But do try and pay as much attention to your immersion as you can, because it all depends on how much you can focus, rather than this definition of passive versus active.
Did you have like go-to content in that for your active but kind of passive immersion?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I guess, like to use what is it? The anime audio. They like rip that off.
Yeah.
I tried that sometimes. That never really did it for me. I just found it jarring how they were like quick skips between like dialogue lines. So for me, I always just use podcasts. Podcasts or audiobooks were mainly what I used. Sometimes if it was like a YouTube video where most of it was speaking, I'd rip the audio for that. But no, often like podcasts, I'd say, was probably the main one.
And were you like repeat listening to that content, or would it be like, just one and done?
Often I would, yeah. Often I would, but I normally set like if I am going to re-listen to something, I'll set like a time period between that,
right?
So that I forget it, or maybe between that time period I've improved at a certain amount, and then I can actually feel how much I've improved by the time I re-listen to it.
Cool. Also, quick question, but do you think that listening to music and like parsing music can be a form of immersion? Or do you think that's like super easy to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. Because I mean, like, obviously the way stuff is pronounced in music, I mean, it depends on the music you listen to a lot, is what I'm going to say. Sometimes stuff is obviously pronounced very differently to how it would in actual speech. I find as a beginner, some songs, especially like, when I listened to Japanese rap when I was, early on, I missed a lot in that, so I found it quite difficult to actually gain much from that. I feel like you could gain some if it's a very lyrical song and you're actually paying attention to the lyrics. So, I mean, if you really enjoy it and you feel like you are getting something out of it, then go for it. But I feel like if we're talking about, what's the better listening content, then there's definitely better sources of listening immersion out there.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. I guess now we can move on to KanjiEater's favorite topic, Anki. So, how do you think Anki's helped or hindered you, Jazzy?
Okay, good question.
You are still there, Jazzy. We can still see you.
Yeah, it's fine. Oh, okay.
All right. Jazzy's
I think
headset
we
has
have
died. So what?
some technical difficulties, but yeah, we'll be back shortly. So, Jazzy
right.
is making a personal request to charge his headset. I believe on the viewer's side there should be no problems, but
Yeah. Jazzy, go ahead and take care of that. In the meantime, let's catch up with Doth. So,
oh sure.
Doth, I believe you took the Kanken, right? You making some progress on
I
that?
I did, yeah. I mean, I took like Jinnikyu and Nikyu. I passed both of them on the same day. That was pretty nice.
You took 2 tests on the
I
same
have
day? Is that a normal
yeah.
thing? I haven't looked at this at all.
That I wouldn't say is no. I mean, for some Japanese, it's actually pretty normal because like the stuff in like Nikyu level 2 is covered in like Jin Nikyu. So like if you can't pass the previous one, you probably can't pass the latter one, right? It kind of makes sense, but some of it is different. Like the Yoji parts, they have like different specific Yoji or like kanji that come out. But besides that, if you know most of it, you should. I say you should be able to pass, but I was pretty giri, honestly. So
So
yeah, but a pass is a pass.
what
Yeah.
what work did you put into preparing for that?
Yeah, I did make like a Google Doc about my experience. I didn't make a Reddit post because I don't think Reddit knows about Kanken or they don't really care about it. You know, JLPT
Okay.
is like the only thing,
Yeah.
right? And then like N5 beats N1, so you know what are you gonna do? I did 200 hours of total like writing practice.
Okay.
Like 50 hours I think is Anki. So like the Kanken deck I think is a very amazing deck, of course. And then also like another 100 hours or so of like 100 hours of Anki, I think. 50 hours of like test practice or like using textbooks and stuff. I don't really show textbook, but for like Kanken, practicing is a good thing to do, just like with questions and stuff. So like past papers. And then there's the Kanken game, the DS game, which you can use an emulator on your laptop and just play with it. Pretty fun to do, kind of repetitive, to be honest. So yeah, I have been thinking of taking Jin Ikkyu, so like level pre-1, around summer. But one thing that I found is that I haven't mined all of the kanji yet
Oh,
at
really?
that level. Yeah, you would think I would have all of them by now, but
Because
there's some like
how many cards are you at, and kanji have you mined at this point?
I think it's like I'm hard stuck on like 4,000 kanji.
Okay,
now.
wow. And you still haven't seen all of them.
Last time on my interview, because like the thing is, I see some ikkyu kanji more than jun ikkyu in like immersion, because like those things are like meme kanji or like literary words that you see all the time in like LNs or VNs.
Sure.
But there's some like in jun ikkyu where they're like, I don't know, like I either never see them or like they're kind of in specific yoji, like those yoji from like Chinese stories or like history. Nobody cares about them, but they're in Kanken, whatever. So yeah.
I only
Those stuff.
mine the Buddhist kanji and those Yojijukugo, so yeah, that's all my Anki time is consumed with.
Right. And so yeah, I'm hard stuck around that. I can like learn them if I force myself. I took like a practice test and I got like 130. The thing is the passing grade is 160, so still some ways to go. But if I practice for like 4 months, I might be able to pass. Yeah.
Okay, so is that the next step? 4 months, you gonna take the big one?
Hopefully. I mean, I'm thinking about. I'll definitely take a test in summer.
Yeah.
Will that be Kanken or will it be what do you call it? Nihongo Kente. This is the other like Japanese test, like JLPT but for natives. I'm thinking of taking one of them. So yeah.
Okay. All right, Jazzy, you are back. We were talking about Anki helping.
Sorry, I had a bit of a
not a problem.
Had a bit of a headset disaster there.
Not a problem.
It'll last for the rest of the podcast.
Awesome. As long as it doesn't happen 3 times like Doth's interview, you'll still have beaten Doth. So, how about Anki helping or hindering?
Cool. So yeah, like I was saying on this, a lot of people seem to have taken from my post, and I've made a response to this as well. I think in the Murray way at one point. But what I want to say is that Anki helps, but it was not at any point, the key to my journey. I feel like,
right.
I feel like it definitely made things quicker, but that's all it really is, just an aid. I learned way more through my reading than I did through Anki. reading helped me learn more vocab than I did through Anki. So my Anki cards aren't really representative of my vocab because I learned more through just reading. It also obviously, helped a lot more with reading comprehension and speed, of course.
Yep.
I don't think that's, I think that's quite obvious. If you just did Anki up until like 20,000 words, you still wouldn't then just be able to read fluently. And also with listening as well, reading, of course, helped me gain that vocab, which I was then able to, pick out in listening. So I feel like reading is so important. And then obviously supplementing that with listening, good quality immersion, all of that stuff, that's so much more important than the Anki. The Anki is just a minor supplement, is all I want to say, to, especially for learning the words which you have difficulty remembering or that are quite rare. That's really what it should be used for mostly. And again, I wouldn't, it can be good to sort of optimize your settings, try and improve your retention, but I wouldn't get too hung up over it. Yeah. I'm just trying to say this because I've seen some people that spend like an hour a day on Anki and then only get an hour a day of immersion. And of course, it's going to depend exactly on how much you immerse as to how much Anki you want to do. Like if you're immersing 6 hours every day and you want to do Anki for an hour a day, I still don't think it's a good use of your time, but sure, you could do it. But if you're only able to immerse an hour a day and you do 1 hour of Anki a day, I think you're really, you're getting your priorities wrong at that point.
Yep.
It's definitely not as important as the immersion.
Yeah, Kanji not looking too good. I think that hit too close to home, maybe.
Yeah, right. That was literally how I started out. It was like, okay, let's just Anki everything. And you know what? I'll still say, like, if I don't put it in Anki for some reason, it still feels like it doesn't stick as well. And I'm a little curious if that's just the experience, because I've seen this with the people that have higher retention rates in general. Like that's not an Anki thing. Like we can measure it through Anki, but people that in general have these higher retention rates seem definitely to get faster. They don't need to put it in Anki as much. And I am curious if maybe at some point, like I don't know what that balance is, I guess, personally, of because if you have a low retention rate, and even if you encounter it, more, you're going to be more apt to forget it. So drilling it with Anki makes sense to an extent, but at the same time, it's like there has to be a balance there. So I've certainly gone too far on one direction with just all Anki all the time, and it's not pretty. And now I'm definitely just trying to cut that back, because at this point I don't really even think that I think less and less these days that Anki is actually as critical as this community in particular makes it out to be, despite being still a frequent Anki user. What about as far as leeches? How do you deal with that, Jazzy?
So in terms of like, I guess you mean like, did I delete them or just tag them? Yeah. So I normally just tag them, so I don't delete them. I'll just tag them and just continue repping them until eventually I get it. I don't think I've ever had a leech where, after like 10 tries, I didn't get it. I think that was the most I've ever had. But yeah, I think especially at that point, once I've actually got it tagged as a leech, it just makes me think, okay, maybe I should actually try and remember this one a lot harder. And usually then I end up, remembering those ones. But
right.
Yeah, in terms of how I deal with it, I tag them. I don't delete them.
Oh, quick few, I think, important questions. First, do you still mine? Second, do you still regularly review? And third, what is your stance on backlog, Anki backlog?
Right. Okay. So do I still mine? Yes, I still mine. I never set a limit on how much I mine in a day. I always just mine everything I can. I guess that comes onto the backlog one as well. But yeah, I mean, the thing is obviously partly because I'm not immersing as much nowadays. Like nowadays, my average is like 2 hours a day on weekdays. And then I'll get like, 3 or 4 on weekends. That's like the average. So obviously partly because of that. And also just because in most of the content that I immerse in, I don't find new words as often. So it's just very rare. So nowadays my Anki is mostly just reviews on a lot of days because I just don't have as many new cards. Like in a week, I'll do maybe like, I'll only be able to find like 30 new cards, I guess, on average. Yeah. I mean, if I specifically look for like really hard content, just to mine as many new words as I can, then I probably could find a lot more. But for most of the content that I want to, actually read anyway, even like VNs on like the higher level, I find that I don't find as much to mine anymore. And I guess, the second question, was it mostly reviews? Yeah, so my Anki is mostly just reviews nowadays, which is great because, I mean, people might think that I like doing Anki based on the fact that, I did do quite a few cards per day for a while. But no, let me make it clear now, I hated Anki. That's one of the reasons why I did it quickly, because I wanted to get it out of the way, as quickly as possible. I hated it. And I'm glad that nowadays it's mostly just, reviews. So it takes up literally no time. And what was the third question again? Sorry.
Your stance on backlog. Do you still have a backlog? Or
no, I don't have a backlog anymore. So I mentioned this in my post as well, but I caught up with my backlog at like around the start of June. So this was one of the reasons why I started doing like 50 cards a day for the last 3 months, because I wanted to catch up on that. Because for a long time, because I don't set a limit on how much I mine in a day. So for a long time, my backlog was going way over like the amount of cards I was actually repping per day, the amount of new cards, until eventually it got to like that tipping point where, it started decreasing and the amount of cards I was repping per day was larger. And eventually, I caught up to my backlog. How I feel about having a backlog, like, I feel like it was fine. But then again, I know some people who didn't have a backlog and their Anki was better than mine. So, shout out to Madromi. I don't know if he's watching this, but like the guy's a beast with Anki. He had like 98% retention or something, 96 to 98% retention. And he does his cards faster than me. So, I mean, you'll always get, people that can do crazy amounts. And like, that's one reason why I feel like maybe not having a backlog is a good reason, because he didn't have a backlog. And a lot of people that say that they finished their backlog then have a better job of remembering the new cards. For me, I didn't really feel like it affected me that much. Like I'm fine with having a backlog, but I know for some people it can, it can be a deal breaker. So I'd say, it depends on your situation.
yeah, but also Maduromi is, Chinese, so that's one good thing. Yeah. Yeah. Also, for the viewers who don't know about Maduromi, he's a very good Japanese learner. He also passed N1 in like 1 year. He has like the same score as me, but faster. So shout out to him.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, in these communities as well that, because they didn't make a Reddit post, they don't get the recognition that they should. But, there's a load of other people that got a really good score in a very quick time. So Maduromi's one. Shout out to Tommy as well. The guy also got 170 plus after, I think, 16 months or something. So yeah, again, like there's loads of people that have smashed it, honestly.
Nice. So, I guess on the topic of a backlog, I mean, do you find yourself ever like adding duplicates or things that's like, oh, I already have a card for that, and then do you just like prioritize those cards accordingly, or what did you find with that?
You mean duplicate as in like I ended up adding the same vocab word twice?
Yeah, something like that. Like, oh, I've definitely already seen this. We'll just prioritize this card or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep duplicate Anki cards, so I'll check every now and then as well if I have any duplicates, and if I do, I'll just delete the lower quality card.
Right.
Is all it really comes down to. But yeah, no, I don't keep duplicates. That's how I deal with it.
Gotcha. So given that you were, doing about 50 cards a day, has that been normal for you? Like in your other academic studies, like do you find yourself able to like just chow down on that much information that fast? Because that does seem like a lot.
The thing is with this, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I guess this addresses what a lot of people were saying with, I probably have, like photographic memory or some insane memory. What I would say is like, I've done quite well academically so far. And I find that I can learn things quite quickly in general. I definitely don't think it's like the sort of genius level that some people are trying to make out.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say that at all, but I would say, I can pick things up quite quickly. But in terms of memory, I don't think my memory is as good as people are trying to make out. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing a physics degree as well, and why I prefer like physics and maths over other things. Because what I found with physics and maths is that, even if you don't remember all the content, you can intuitively sort of just figure it out using like the same formulas and just, intuition.
Mhm.
In other words, I was just being lazy in school. Whereas compared to the stuff like biology, where you actually have to, memorize a bunch of stuff, I didn't like those as much.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say my memory is anything, significant. It's, significantly great, like some people are trying to make out.
Mhm.
I forget things all the time, but yeah. So, like I said, sometimes I can pick things up quite quickly. Academically, I've put in a lot of work there. So I guess in terms of large amounts of information, then I guess throughout my education, so school, uni,
Mhm.
yeah.
That is a common trend that I've noticed talking to people that like I said, like you guys, according to your Anki reviews, have like higher retention, but even like Stevie J was saying, like I don't feel like I have some super memory or something here. So it's interesting to see that from your guys' perspective. Moving on to some a few last random questions as we begin to wrap this up. Aussieman asks, so how long have you been boxing for, and do you want to go pro at some time in the future?
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I did mention that I've been an amateur boxer for a while now. So I've been boxing for almost 7 years now,
Mm.
6 to 7 years. So I started around the start of high school. Well, I guess Americans would call it high school. Yeah, so about 6 to 7 years. In terms of do I want to go pro? No. So I'm planning to, stay amateur. I guess in terms of like my career aspirations in general, what I want to go into is strategy consulting. So that's kind of what interests me. Um, and I mean, I really enjoy boxing. Like, I love it. I always recommend people to take on something like MMA or boxing, just because of, the discipline it instills in you, the stuff it teaches you, like, trying to push past your limits.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously, the mental and physical health benefits. There's just so much good it does for you. And, I like competing in it. But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's more like, it's more like one of those risk things. Obviously, there's a lot of risk involved in going into that sort of thing, especially if you're trying to make it pro. And you don't have something like an Olympic level achievement,
Mm-hmm.
especially for boxing, or like at least national level achievement. So yeah, I mean, especially because of COVID as well, I feel like that's kind of played a big obstacle for me thus far. But yeah, no. So yeah, for me, I feel like, yeah, who knows what the future will hold. But for now, probably not pro. Strategy consulting is what I'm looking into as a career field, and that's what interests me at the moment.
Gotcha. So, but I think Aussieman's real question here was, do you think you can beat Aussieman in a fight?
Ooh.
Oh, I see. So it was a challenge.
Anything
I get
Aussieman
it.
says tends to come off as a challenge. So yeah, it was a challenge.
Okay, I get it. Well, I guess, we'll never know if we don't try. So I guess if I'm down in Japan, Aussie man, and you want to go for a friendly spar, man, I'm here for you, man.
All right.
If you want to go, you can
Yo,
Please invite me and
active
Doth, and we
challenge.
will do some announcements for it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to see that live.
go. Japanese learning community boxing. Here it is.
There we go. All right.
Amazing. Yeah, actually, on the topic of, sports in general, what is your take on, general health habits? Like, would you consider yourself pretty complex when it comes to like meals, tracking calories, sleep schedule? And also, do you think yourself like somebody who's clean with their surroundings and everything?
Okay, right. So I guess with the first one, like I keep track to an extent. I'm not like OCD, so it's not like to the calorie, every meal. Like generally, I will like, while I'm at uni, I'll plan ahead my meals. I'll think about what I'm going to have the next day, roughly, within a certain calorie limit. Make sure that I get, roughly this amount of protein. So not like to the exact, but like I make sure that I get, what I need. So yeah, I do fuss over my nutrition, but to a certain extent. And also what I would say is like, I rarely fast food or eat out. So I'm quite big on like, the quality of what you eat. Like I rarely eat like processed meat or, just really greasy stuff. So I try to, stay healthy, obviously. Doing boxing, of course, helps with that. I don't really have a choice. You got to do it. So yeah, I would say that, I do take a lot of care of my health in that sense. In terms of cleanliness, here I would say I am almost OCD with like cleanliness and hygiene. Like I have to keep clean, like me and my surroundings. Yeah, I feel like for me, having like dirty surroundings, I can't be as productive. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I'm quite OCD about that.
So, guys, if you're dirty, you're not going to make it. Just keep that in mind. So, a question from Pollution over on the Discord. You've made all of us feel really good, but maybe what would make us feel even better, Jazzy, could you talk about anything you dislike about yourself or want to change right now? Doesn't have to be language related. Just give us something, Jazzy.
Well, okay, we're getting deep.
Deep Weeb
podcast. It isn't the deep week for no reason. Yep. To be honest, man, I mean, there's a lot. Like I feel like people only see this Japanese learning side of me on these communities,
right?
But obviously, me as a person, I'm a human being. I've got tons of flaws. A lot of things that I regret or things that I wish I could do better. And I'm always trying to improve as a person every year. So it's not like I ever settle for. So it's hard to pick one thing, but I guess if I was going to, then I would say actively doing things that, actively doing things that I find really challenging. I think I don't feel like I'm really bad at this, but there will definitely be some times, maybe in like the past year, I found where like I'll sometimes take the easier route with something. While knowing that that might not be what's actually best for me in the long run. So I think that's definitely, like actively seeking out those challenges to, to counter, to, develop myself as a person rather than, trying to turn away from them or find a different route, is, I guess, one thing I would say.
Yeah. You heard it, guys. Japanese is not a challenge. Pretty easy, right?
I mean, for me, the thing is, I feel like with language learning in general, no, I'm not going to say it's really easy, but what I'm trying to say is, I feel like with language learning, there's like two main, motivations. I feel like it falls down to, very broadly speaking, either you really enjoy the process, or you really need it for something in your life. Like it's got a lot of practical, application for you. And obviously, the best situation is where both of those come together. Then you're golden. For me, Japanese was more so like the first, an example of the first. So it's like I don't really need it. I didn't really do it for a specific reason. It's more so that I just really enjoyed the process.
Right.
I really enjoyed learning and that, reading the content. I like the fact that I was learning a new skill at the same time. So it didn't really feel that much like work to me. It genuinely just felt like, a really enjoyable hobby. Whereas I feel like for some people, it's on the other end where it's like you're purely learning it just because of like the practical implication. Maybe someone that's ended up in Japan for whatever reason and they're getting a job and they don't enjoy any Japanese content at all. Then obviously for them, it might be a lot harder to force yourself into immersion, trying to find content that you can still put up with. Because at that point, because you actually need it for something, you've got to be disciplined and put in those hours. And obviously it can be hard if you can't find stuff that you enjoy.
That's fair. So one more question here from Pollution. It is pretty impressive that you've been able to do as much as you have in such a short time. What role did amphetamines play in this? Any?
I guess this links to the health question, but I've never done drugs and I don't plan to ever do them.
All right, so there you go. Drug-free. Yeah. It's the way to be. I never asked Doth that, but we'll pass on that. We'll let the listener.
I'm Muslim, so we don't do drugs.
Okay.
There we go, man.
So, all right, let's talk a little bit about content quickly. Favorite manga, Jazzy?
Ooh, mangas. It's hard to choose one for manga for me. I feel like I want to say Berserk just because
Nice.
Berserk's amazing.
Yeah.
I like a lot about Berserk, man. But I feel like the fact that it won't ever get a proper ending is, it's sad, but it also makes me hesitate to put it as number one. So I'd say either Berserk.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'd say either Berserk or Yasumi Punpun.
Oh, really? I haven't read that one yet.
And that's a really good. Yeah, it's really good. What I would say is it's like pure despair. So if you're not feeling too good, I would not recommend it as a manga because let's just say there's no happiness in it. But overall, it is really good. The art is amazing. The way like emotions and stuff are described in it is done really well.
I asked my wife. So my wife is actually reading that one right now, and anytime I ask her how is it, she always says aggressively weird. that's the only way she describes it. All right, guess I'm gonna have to read that.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doth, any from your side?
One manga that's I think recently became the monthly manga of the Moiwei is it's the one where you sell your life for like 10,000 yen. Jumio.
Oh, I know which one you're on about. Yeah.
I don't know this one.
Yeah, that one. That's probably still my favorite manga. Period. Even though it's really short. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't come to mind for me, but I actually haven't reread that one in Japanese. I probably should at some point. But I read it in English a few years ago, and that one is amazing, especially for how short it is. Like considering it's such a short manga, how impactful it is in that length is amazing. Honestly, it's definitely up there in some of the best stuff I've read.
I will actually have to.
Yeah, for like short manga, that and like Okami Shonen was one of my favorites. Yeah.
I guess for me on that one, I really like Attack on Titan, Berserk, those ones. But recently, Made in Abyss. I've been reading that, and the art in that is absolutely incredible. It's like there's like watercolor in it. There's techniques that like I've never seen anywhere else, and I've read quite a bit of manga at this point. And seeing all the trauma that the characters go through in that, I'm like, this is some Berserk level stuff. I was actually just saying that the other day. I was like, this is pretty dark, especially considering the aesthetic of it from the beginning. It looks like it's going to be like some chibi happy thing, and it's not. It's pretty awful, but I like that.
Just to comment on Made in Abyss.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. I haven't read the manga because I decided to stay anime only for that one, just because of how much I like the anime.
Anime's good.
But honestly, like I remember I put it off for so long just because I looked at the art and I was like, some chibi art here. This isn't going to be the type of thing I'm into.
Same.
But then, I went into it blind and I got completely blown away. It's genuinely got some of the best world building I've ever seen in an anime. So if you're looking for a rec, then, Made in Abyss is.
There you go. Yeah, I had a Japanese coworker recommend it to me, and I was like, I'm not going to read this. And then like you said, the anime got me hooked. Like, the music's good in it, the actual visuals, the world itself.
The soundtrack's amazing, man.
Yeah. I actually got to see that guy, Kevin Pinkin, at one of these anime conventions over here in the Chicago area. And it was
for real?
Yeah, it was really cool to get to hear him talk about actually making those songs, how they like the actual person who was singing in it was like, I think, a friend of the director, so they pulled him in, and it was just kind of seeing how they crafted all the music for it. And then the movie is also really excellent. So I actually just rewatched that, and I never rewatch content. So good stuff. All right, so Kamada has been begging for us to talk about VNs. That's the family friendly version of this question. So, given that the Deep Weeb podcast is so family friendly, what are your favorite VNs, gentlemen?
Doth, do you want to go first?
I mean, if it's family friendly, oh god. I mean, Island, right? That's one that immediately comes to me.
You can be honest.
If I reread it, I'm not sure if it would be my favorite anymore. It's definitely like an amazing one for me, of course, right?
Just say Debutopia already, Doth. Just say Debutopia already.
No. I actually have not read that. I'm really sorry,
GJT.
I have not read Debutopia. I mean, I haven't added to my VNDB.
Okay.
I'll say that. I'll say that.
So Island, is that your top one, Doth?
Yeah. I mean, technically, KKK, Kajiri Kamikagura is family friendly.
Yeah, maybe call it by the Japanese name, Doth. I'm not trying to be associated with any groups like that.
True. I really like that. So.
Yeah, I'm already associated with one 3-letter group called DJT apparently for hanging out with you, Doth. So only so many I can handle.
Right.
What about you,
Yeah,
Jazzy?
I mean, yeah, for me, well,
You're still here, Jazzy. We still see you.
Yeah, we see you.
In the meantime, till you're back, Jazzy, Gyakujin Saiban, family friendly and still really fun. Let's see. The other one that I've been reading recently is Steins Gate, but unfortunately, I watched the anime first on that one, and it is really hard to get back into. Like, despite it being a fantastic story, since I already watched the anime, really liked it, it's hard to appreciate it as much knowing all the plot twists that are coming. So, I've been having some trouble with that one, but then I also did start Saya no Uta as well, which is a mixed bag. But what were you going to say there, Doth?
No, because like the thing is, I haven't read Steins Gate 2, to be honest. But like the people like in DJ2 who have read it, I normally have like watched the anime first. They still say it's amazing, and that like even though the anime is amazing, the VN is still better, or like can do better. So yeah,
it is. I will say it feels like it's kind of been spoiled for me a bit already, though. But it's just my take. Saya no Uta, I'm probably like 2/3 of the way through it. I really like it. I think some
do you
of
have trouble with that?
No, I think some of the extreme content in it comes off a little bit forced. No pun intended. Like there's just like stuff in it that is like, are they just doing this to sell more VNs or what? So I don't know. I really like the concept of it. I just think.
I mean, it's a really old VN though. It's like 2000 and something, right? So like it's a breakthrough of its time, I think.
That's fair.
Also, I think you said, Kanji, that if you were to take an JLPT N1 test, you weren't sure if you could pass.
Yeah.
I read Saya no Uta after finishing N1, and I still mined like 400 words, I think. So.
Yeah, I'm still mining a decent amount, and it is slow, but I mean, I'm still reading like 5,000, 6,000 characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not hard to follow the plot, but I would say the sentences are pretty hard, Saya no Uta, to be honest.
Yeah, they are quite long, aren't they? Like, I have found that interesting, especially coming off of that from, what's that one called that the DJT Club just did? Narcissus?
Yeah, Narcissus.
Yeah. Like, coming from one like that, or the Kanojo to Kimi Nani Nani. That one, that is like the novel pick right now. Both of those tend to have much shorter sentences, so they're much easier. I'll also say they're a little bit less interesting than I feel like Saya no Uta, kind of like sci-fi-ish vibes, is a little more interesting to me at least. But
I mean, anything from Nitro Plus is amazing though. Tokyo Necro also very good if you guys haven't read.
So I am a you know J Tank, right? So his VN list is basically like my my dream list there. So I was like, I don't really know where to start, and it's just like, oh, J Tank says this one, this one, this one, this one. So shout out to J Tank for all of his
yeah, he does have good taste.
Yeah, because I mean, I was actually talking to a Japanese friend about this recently, with just like anime trends in general, like the whole idea of, you know, building your lolicon harem in a VN, just, you know, it doesn't appeal to me as a married man that just I don't even know if that has anything to do with it, honestly. There's just no appeal to having these cartoon characters and having them go through your male fantasy. But it does seem like that community has kind of latched onto that. I mean, what are your thoughts around that, Doth?
The Kuni community, you mean?
Yes, that one.
Oh my god! I mean, like at least in DJT, I think half of it is a meme, to be honest.
Like, you don't think they're really interested? It's just for the memes.
You can kind of tell who's like really into it and who's just like in it for the memes. I'm in it for the memes, to be honest.
Okay,
it is kind of funny. You gotta love like when there's like this kind of provocative imagery and like everyone just starts spamming the sobbing meme, like, you know, the eternal despair. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so funny. Yeah. All
right, Jazzy, are you back? Are you ready to talk more about VNs?
I'm back, man. Yep.
Okay.
It died again. Hopefully the last time. Otherwise,
it's okay.
Won't be able to beat Doth
2 times, not 3 times.
Yeah,
safe.
Yeah, it's a competition.
So got one more chance.
All right. So,
yeah. So, was it favorite VN, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, Currently, I'm reading White Album 2, which is one of the VNs I've been wanting to read ever since I started. And that's been going really good. So, I mean, I haven't finished yet, but at the rate it's going, like if the ending, nails it and everything, it probably will be my favorite VN. It's honestly amazing. Other than that, Hakchu no Aojashin. I think the English name is what, Cyanotope something. That's really good. I highly recommend that as well, especially the last case in it, so case 0, was
I saw that
really
in your post,
good.
Yeah. Actually, if Hakuchumi wasn't, I mean, the Japanese isn't family friendly, but I was about to say that instead of Island because I also gave that 10 out of 10. To be honest.
And then also Musicus is the other one I would say. So Musicus is also a really good VM. I'd highly recommend that too. And then of course Summer Pockets, the one everyone knows me for shilling.
Yep. Okay. Last chance to plug any other Japanese content, Jazzy. Any other things that really stuck out to you that people should check out?
So I guess I've talked about VN. I've talked about LNs. Some other anime, I guess. So Tengen Toppa Guren Lagan. I'm sure it's no mystery from my Discord profile picture, but yeah, that's probably my favorite anime. Other really good ones are Clanad, of course, Steins Gate, amazing. Hunter x Hunter, another brilliant one. Shingeki no Kyojin. Shout out to everyone watching, the last season right now. It's amazing. It is amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, there's that. And yeah, those are some of my favorites. Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess light novels. So the English name, Classroom of the Elite, is a good one. I feel like a lot of people have read that one. I'm not completely up to date on it. But yeah, that one's really good. I like that series a lot. YouTube channels. Again, I can't remember the exact. Oh, it's called No Good TV. I linked it in my Reddit post as well.
Yep.
But especially when I was starting out, I used that one quite a lot.
Okay.
Just because it was just a bunch of natural conversations on a bunch of different stuff. They'd get celebrity guests on and stuff. It was decent, I guess. Yeah, nothing amazing, but it was nice. I used that quite a bit. Sokoani, the podcast, I really like. One thing I really like about that is because they cover different anime series. Normally, I'd watch the anime series and then I'd watch the associated podcast episode afterwards, so I'd have some context behind it. And I found, especially early on, that really helped. So yeah, I highly recommend that too. Dramas, Ichi Litoro no Namida is a really good drama. 1 Liter of Tears, if you translate that into English. Yeah, that's a very good drama.
I haven't seen that one.
I guess those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah,
sorry.
I haven't seen that drama, but I do know with a Sokoani podcast, I've had the exact same experience as you. It's okay, if I've watched the episode, these episodes make a lot of sense and they can be really engaging. So that's a good one. I also
I feel especially early on, that's a really good podcast to use. Yeah.
And then I'll have to post it to the Discord of what it is because I don't remember the name either. But I recently was listening to a gaming podcast and they were talking about Metroid Dread or something like that. And even though I hadn't played that one, I was like, oh, this is actually still really good content too. So that was another good podcast that I've encountered recently. I think we can go ahead and start wrapping this up. So before I'll actually open this up real quick. Doth, any last questions for Jazzy before we do our final last question?
I'm fine, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So last question, Jazzy, for everybody. What's one piece of advice you'd like to give people learning Japanese?
Right. Okay. I mean, I guess the typical one, read more. All of that has been said already. So what I will say, just to end off, is that the whole deal of comparing yourself with others. I can't lie. I'm a competitive person. I'm not going to deny that. I do like my competition. I use it to motivate me. I use it as a good source of motivation. Just comparing myself to others to try and push myself to do better. But what I would always say is, what I always do is I draw this line after which, I don't get too invested in it past that point. So what I'd say is it's very important to try and do this sort of thing, especially when you're in, these sort of Discord communities and stuff, where it's like you use the competition if it helps you to fuel you to do better. But always draw that clear line and just know that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where others are. The real competition is between you and yourself. So for me, that's always been the key with anything I do. I'll use competition with others to motivate me all the time. But at the end of the day, whatever I'm trying to do, the ultimate competition is with me. So trying to do, the best that I can personally every day, trying to improve on myself, trying to make sure that at least I'm putting in all the effort that I can, rather than comparing myself to others. So what I would say is just do the best you can within the limits you can, and just enjoy Japanese, man.
That's funny. I actually wrote out something to say that was very similar to this in closing, but I don't need to. You already summed it up perfectly, Jazzy. Thanks so much for that. All right, guys, where can people find you on the internet, Jazzy?
Sure. So, there's my Discord handle, which is Jazzy, #1234 is my Discord number. You can contact me on there. I'll usually, I reply to most DMs. What I will say is that, nowadays I'm not on social media in general, but also Discord that often, just because I'm, focusing on other things. But, if you do drop the DM, I will reply to you. So if you want to get in touch with me, then there's a place.
Gotcha. Okay. Doth, where can people find you?
Normal, Doth5403.
All right. And you guys know where you can find me hanging out on the Deep Weeb Lounge Discord and on Twitter. So I will see you guys around. Thanks so much, Jazzy, for joining. Thanks so much, Doth, for, as always, killing it. Jazzy, please do come back sometime when you've made your next gigantic milestone, all right?
Would love to, man. It was a pleasure to be on.
All right. Likewise. Thank you.